Chapter 1621. This scene was too shocking. It seemed that as Jiang Tian rushed past, the fleet of battleships turned into a sea of fire and exploded like flowers blooming behind Jiang Tian. This is the invisible fleet of the ruins of Immortality's artifact forging and array formation. Under the Academy's light screen, countless disciples cried out in shock. In fact, Jiang Tian's speed was too fast. Even the most advanced imprint Dharma artifacts in the ruins of Immortality could not capture him. Even if a soul formation cultivator's divine sense tried to track him, they would feel dizzy and nauseous. In the eyes of everyone, it was as if Jiang Tian's body shook and many battleships and war machines fell into a sea of fire and exploded one after another. How can he be so powerful? Jade Lotus Fairy's face changed color. She was as pale as a corpse that had been dead for 3 days. Her delicate body trembled slightly and she shivered. As a cultivation civilization that had escaped from the apocalypse 10,000 years ago, the cultivators of the ruins of Immortality had always been full of a sense of crisis and were very careful and cautious. After Jiang Tian killed Divine Emperor Hanshi, the ruins of Immortality had already sensed a deep crisis. They prepared for a decisive battle and mobilized the power of the entire ruins of Immortality to speed up the development of these war machines. As an array formation master, Jade Lotus Fairy understood this best. These battleships came from the design plans left behind by the Wood Spirit Planet civilization. They had taken thousands of years of hard work from countless people in the ruins of Immortality and used the cultivation resources of the entire ruins of Immortality. They represented the highest level of artifact forging and array formation in the ruins of Immortality. However, all of this was broken by Jiang Tian in a matter of minutes and seconds. It could be said that at this moment, Jade Lotus Fairy's worldview was about to collapse. She was full of disbelief, as if she had seen a ghost. Master has already used the swordsman secret technique, but he still can't break down the traces of the divine law that Kong Teichu left in his body. Grand Chancellor Xian, whose face was full of horror and disbelief. The swordsman secret technique was one of the 9 great heavenly techniques of the Wood Spirit Planet. It was mainly used for healing and recovery. However, the headmaster's mastery of this secret skill was so profound that it had never been seen before. He had reached the peak and reached the point where he could be reborn from a drop of blood and regenerate his physical body in the blink of an eye. It was truly miraculous. But at this moment, no matter how hard the headmaster tried to use the heavenly skill of Qi, the Dharma that Jiang Tian had left on his wounds could not be destroyed. It was like the grass on the lily plain that would grow again when the spring breeze blew. It was as if it could exist forever. Oh no, he caught up. Sir, be careful. At this moment, countless disciples of the Academy were dumbfounded, and cries of surprise rose and fell. The crowd saw that Jiang Tian's figure flashed like a fleeting shadow, crossing the distance of 100 miles and arriving in front of the teacher. The cold sword radiance was like snow, and it carried a terrifying killing intent. It was like a silver stream as it directly descended from the 9 heavens. At this moment, the headmaster used the heavenly skill of attainment, and his speed was as fast as lightning. Although he had fallen to the nascent soul level, he was still a soul formation grand cultivator. Perhaps not many people in the ruins of Immortality could reach such speed. Under the extreme speed of Jiang Tian's Kunpeng, the headmaster was like a disabled old man who could not move freely. In the blink of an eye, Jiang Tian had caught up with him. Is the headmaster going to die today? Kong Teichu, this demon is so vicious. Headmaster, our great headmaster is being slaughtered by a thief today. Kong Teichu, you will be punished by the heavens for your reckless actions. You will die a horrible death. In an instant, countless cultivators and mortals in the vast ruins of Immortality shouted and cursed. They could not wait to skin Jiang Tian and refine his divine soul to vent their anger. Good. This old thief is finally finished. Your Majesty, kill him and avenge the ancient sages. On the other hand, the great co-warriors were cheering. Their eyes were filled with excitement and they clenched their fists again. The headmaster was the right-hand man of the old ruins emperor. He had participated in the War of the Age of Dao damage and killed countless people. Millions of corpses were lying on the ground. It could be said that his hands were stained with the ruins of immortality of the ancients and sages. He was truly an invader. Most hateful of all was that after the ruins of immortality imperial court was established, this invader, the war maniac, had transformed into a peerless Confucian scholar. Every word he spoke was filled with benevolence, righteousness, and morality. He spoke of the righteousness of all living things, and he always referred to himself as heaven, earth, king, father, and teacher. He was worshipped and revered by the masses, as if he could save them all, and was a lofty and benevolent god. Now, he had fallen to the nascent soul level. He was no match for Jiang Tian in a battle of the same level. He would be cut into ashes with one slash. Just when everyone, including the headmaster himself, thought that he could not dodge Jiang Tian's attack. Confucius, stop. The sword god is coming. A voice that was full of majesty and sharp like a precious sword came from the horizon. It seemed to be very far away, hundreds of miles or even thousands of miles away. This voice was not a normal sound wave, but a secret true essence technique. It was 10 times or 100 times faster than normal sound waves. A wise man with an extraordinary cultivation saw that when the word Jiang rang out, a bright light appeared in the horizon. The bright light instantly turned into a bright shooting star, cutting through 100 li of heaven and earth, dividing the sea of clouds and stars. When the word also fell, that shooting star had already arrived behind Jiang Tian. It was actually a sharp sword light. The speed of this flying sword was already fast to an unimaginable degree. The sword god is coming. The sword god in white. In an instant, the cultivators near the Xiantian mountain range and the mortals at the border of the ruins of immortality all knelt on the ground with worship in their eyes, as if they had seen a god. They looked at him with even more respect than when they saw the headmaster. All the cultivators knew that the headmaster was not a cultivator from the Southgate Galaxy, but from the distant Big Dipper Galaxy. It was rumored that the cultivation civilization there was even stronger. The sword gods Dharma and Great Tao were superior to the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. Unlike the headmaster, who used the method of academies to open the doors of convenience and recruit disciples, the god of swords took the path of elites. He cultivated no more than 10 sword servants, but every one of them had reached the divine transformation realm, becoming another major branch in the ruins of immortality. They were highly respected, and even relied heavily on by the ruins' emperor's palace. Seeing that the sword god had struck, even the headmaster retreated like a comet falling from the sky. At the same time, there was a smug and hideous smile on his face. He said coldly, "Jiang Taichu, I have strong backup. You cannot kill me." Stuff. Yes, although he was in deep danger and his life was hanging by a thread, he was still very confident as if he had the pearl of wisdom in his hands. Because he could only defend against the sword god's attack. And he had to do his best. Otherwise, Jiang Tian would definitely die. The sword god used the holy weapon, Flying Fairy, and he had already used all his strength. It was the fastest, strongest, and most poisonous sword he had ever used. The headmaster thought that if he were in his shoes, even if he was at the peak of the soul formation realm, he would not have a 50% chance of blocking the sword god's attack and would be seriously injured. "Do you want to fight to the death?" The headmaster smiled smugly. On the one hand, he was sure that Jiang Tian would give up the chase. On the other hand, he was disturbing Jiang Tian's Daoist heart with mental disturbances. In this way, whether he escaped or killed by the sword god, he would have a higher chance of winning. A battle between masters was not only a clash of physical bodies, magic treasures, supernatural powers, and dharma. It was also a battle of spirit and soul. My sword can only advance and never retreat, and it can never return. Jiang Tian's face was as calm as an ancient well without any ripples. His cold gaze was as sharp as a sword, neither increasing nor decreasing, and did not move in the slightest. That kind of firmness made the headmaster's heart palpitate. "Stop! He wants to fight to the death with me? Is he not afraid of death? Why can he? Even if I've been through thousands of years of war on the battlefield, killing in the imperial court, and bathing in the bloody rain in Jianghu, I've never trained myself to be so fearless of death and willing to die together with others. Thoughts surged in the headmaster's mind. He was full of astonishment, surprise, and disbelief. His spiritual soul and physical body were numb and stiff for a moment. His physical body and Dharma defense were a little slower. In a battle between masters, a moment was enough to kill one person. I've been hit. A kind of coldness hit him. The headmaster came back to his senses instantly. But it was too late for him to use the 9 heavenly skills to escape and defend himself. I can't accept this. The crisis of the world is not. Amidst the headmaster's unwilling and desperate cries, Jiang Tian's heaven-extinguishing sword trembled. All sorts of divine precepts exploded and destroyed the headmaster's nascent soul and physical body. They were smashed into pieces, turning into a rain of blood that scattered across the sky. The extremely dense qi of essence and the vast surging vital qi swept across the 9 heavens and 10 lands like raging waves beating against the shore. At this moment, the entire ruins of immortality, and even the cultivators in the 2nd level and 3rd level worlds who saw this scene through the light screen were stunned. They stood motionless as if they had been struck by lightning. The founder of the Imperial Court of the Ruins of Immortality, the founder of the 100 Moons Academy and the Dian Tao Law, and one of the 3 giants of the world, the headmaster, Yu Sheng, died. Chapter 1622. Headmaster, the Great Helmsman, the Saint of the Ages. He actually died? Seeing that the headmaster's soul didn't even have time to escape and was cut into pieces by Jiang Tian's sword aura, the cultivators and mortals of the ruins of immortality were in a daze and couldn't believe it. It was as if their idol had been shattered by Jiang Tian's staff. Teacher, how could you leave us? With his soul annihilated, this was a true death. Even if the Emperor of the Ruins came out, he wouldn't be able to revive the headmaster. At this moment, Fairy Jade Lotus, Xian Hu, and Grand Chancellor Yan Hua were in so much pain that they wanted to die. They cried out in shock, thumped their chests, and stamped their feet, tears falling like rain. At this moment, countless disciples of the academy prostrated themselves on the ground as if they had lost their parents. Their sobs and cries shot into the sky. The clouds were gloomy, and the wind howled. At this moment, in the vast territory of the ruins of immortality, dark clouds gathered, gloomy winds howled, thunder exploded, lightning shot in all directions, and heavy rain poured down. With the connection between heaven and man, this world already knew that the most outstanding cultivator had died. It was as if their own child had died. They seemed to be shocked, angry, and crying in grief. Kong Teichu is hurting himself. He has already lost the best time to dodge and can only take it head-on. And there's no way he can withstand the sword god's sword. There were also wise people who shook their heads and sighed. Kong Teichu, your killing intent is so strong. You're simply bloodthirsty, like a demon from hell. Even if you die, you have to kill my father and son. He's simply a bloodthirsty maniac, inhumane. He's indeed the #1 demon since the establishment of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. He deserves to be killed by the sword god in one strike. Quite a few people realized this, and they all took joy in his misfortune, gnashing their teeth in anger. At this moment, the sword aura attacked Jiang Tian from behind like a meteor. He was wide open and had no time to defend himself. He didn't even have time to use his Dharma and Dharma treasures. He could only take it head-on. No matter how strong Jiang Tian's body was, he couldn't withstand the power of the flying celestial sword. In their eyes, Jiang Tian was already deader than dead. Some people even faintly felt that it was not that the headmaster could not escape, but that he deliberately used himself as bait, sacrificing his Taoism skills and life to catch Kong Teichu, a small fish. And the sword god was the fisherman who cast the hook in the end. Teacher, I'm late. However, I will definitely kill this person and avenge you. Although the sword god and the headmaster did not have the same ideas and fought for power, they had always admired each other. After all, in this tiny world, a remote and desolate place, being able to cultivate to such a realm and even comprehend the grand development Tao law could absolutely be considered as an extraordinary genius. At that moment, seeing the headmaster fall, the sword god of the ruins emperor's palace, who was no longer in his prime, revealed a look of vicissitudes in his sharp eyes. He could not help but feel sorrow for the death of a rabbit and the death of a fox. The great Tao was heartless. The sky was like a cold knife and the earth was like a chopping board. In the eyes of mortals, the cultivators of this world were high and mighty. But in the eyes of heaven and earth, they were merely fish on the chopping block. There were as many cultivators as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand in the Ganges River. How many of them could transcend heaven and earth and live for a long time? Before the great Tao of heaven and earth could suppress them, they had already died at the hands of their own kind. Chila. The sword's name was Flying Celestial. The sword beam was cold and sharp. The sword god's sword technique had already reached the realm of simplifying complexity and returning to simplicity. There was nothing else, only a sword. Chi. The sword stabbed into Jiang Tian's back. Immediately, the space-shattering Dharma erupted. The cold sword Chi formed the Dharma of the sword, which was incomparably sharp. It could easily penetrate asteroids and move metal as it stabbed into Jiang Tian's body. Clang, crick, crick. There was a sound that sounded like metal and stone colliding. It was like a thunderclap or countless sharp weapons rubbing against each other. Everyone was shocked to see that. Jiang Tian's body was shining like stars where the sword hit him. His body was overflowing with light and color, like the golden body of art. This peerless killing move made Jiang Tian's skin cave in and crack. He also fell forward. Blood dyed the sky red. Not only did Jiang Tian smash down a mountain, he also left behind a 10-mile-long crack on the ground that was covered in blood, broken limbs, and broken weapons. It was like the Great Rift Valley in East Africa. Oh no! Seeing this scene, Bai Muxue and Long Shengnan turned pale and cried out loudly. On the Great Ko's side, all of them were scared out of their wits, sweating for Jiang Tian. The headmaster preached and answered questions, established the empire of the immortal ruins and various systems, and prepared the 100 Moon Academy. The sword god, with the flying celestial sword in his hand, swept across all directions and suppressed the 9 heavens and 10 lands. He was peerlessly sharp and unstoppable. His name was known in the immortal ruins. In everyone's view, his attack was the best in the world, even stronger than the headmaster and more difficult to deal with. Kong Teichu is just a barbarian from a peripheral planet. How can he be a match for 2 peerless giants? Some cultivators of the immortal ruins sneered. Kong Teichu is finally dead. This big devil has repeatedly stirred up a storm of blood and destroyed the peace and harmony of the immortal ruins. He deserves to die today. That's great. Many cultivators of the immortal ruins heaved a sigh of relief, wiped their cold sweat, and smiled. I'll go there right now, burn his bones and scatter his ashes, extract his soul and torture him for 10,000 years to avenge my master. Jade Lotus Fairy was full of hatred. She took out a portal and wanted to rush to the Xiantian mountain range. However, before she could use it, she was shocked to see a light screen. With a loud explosion, rocks flew through the air, and the earth shook. Jiang Tian shot up into the sky and stood in the air. Although his black robe was torn and stained with blood, the wounds on his body had already healed. His entire body was filled with a biting cold battle intent. His eyes were shining brightly, and his gaze was sharp like a sword. As expected of the divine body, it can withstand the attack of the sacred weapon, the flying celestial. It's invulnerable and far surpasses all physiques and bloodlines. I heard from the master that his physique should be one of the strongest in the universe. Many of the great bandits' assassins exclaimed, their faces full of reverence. I knew you would be fine. Bai Muxue, who was graceful like a fairy, also smiled through her tears. Her pink face glowed and she was relieved. You have a sacred body of the human race? Is it the heavenly tyrant blood body or the light seal body? Seeing this scene, even the sword god of the ruins Emperor Palace was shocked and blurted out subconsciously. Even the flying celestial sacred weapon that could destroy sacred bodies could not kill him. Kong Teichu's physique was too terrifying. Sacred body? What kind of trash is that? Jiang Tian smiled disdainfully and flicked the sword with his finger. The sword trembled and emitted a dragon's roar that whistled through the world. His fighting spirit rose and soared into the sky. He suppressed the 9 heavens and 10 lands and stirred up the wind and clouds. It was extremely shocking. I have always been particular about reciprocity. You killed me, so have a taste of the absolute heaven sword. This is indeed the legendary treasure of the previous dynasty, the absolute heaven sword. I heard that this sword is very powerful. I think Kang Taechu is just a nascent soul cultivator and does not have much ability. He must have relied on this treasure to succeed in his sneak attack. Although Dharma treasures are good, they are still external objects. Especially this kind of ancient treasure. Every time it is used, it consumes a lot of true essence and dharmic powers. How can he use it so many times with his nascent soul cultivation? He's already at the end of his rope, an arrow at the end of its flight. He is already at the end of his rope, yet he dares to challenge the sword god again. Master, you died so miserably. You were killed by a nascent soul cultivator. Hearing Jiang Tian's words, the scene was in an uproar. There was a lot of discussion and all kinds of voice transmissions. Many people thought that the reason why Jiang Tian could win was because he took advantage of the ancient supreme treasure, and that it could not be considered true ability. Jiang Tian challenged the sword god again. In their eyes, he was even more arrogant and did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. Many people showed disdain on their faces. Young and impetuous. Relying on his good talent and luck, he has gained a lot and is invincible. Naturally, he is arrogant and looks down on everyone. The sword god looked at Jiang Tian condescendingly with a trace of pity in his eyes. It was as if Ma Yun was looking at a self-satisfied nouveau riche who had earned millions. At this time, his flying fairy sword had fallen into his hands. This was an ancient bronze sword. It was simple and dull, with a restrained divine aura. There were no auspicious colors or rays of light bursting out. But everyone was able to sense how terrifying and dangerous this sword was. It was like a raging dragon that was in deep slumber, and it was also like a dormant devil that might erupt with slaughter at any moment, obliterate the world, and crush the world. The sword god held the sword upside down and shook his head with a smile. Kang Taechu, you should be a divine body, which is rare. I originally wanted to take you as my disciple, but seeing how arrogant you are, forget it, I'm not interested anymore. Take me as your disciple? Jiang Tian sneered as if he had heard the biggest joke. Sword god, let's not talk about you. Even if you look at the vast universe, millions of light years of galaxies, billions of powerhouses, how many of them can be my master? In this world, even the gods of creation are no match for me when it comes to using swords. You call yourself the sword god? In my eyes, you are just a piece of trash. The sword god's face changed slightly. Chapter 1623. At sword god's level, his Tao heart was as stable as a rock. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, his expression wouldn't change. However, when he heard Jiang Tian's words, he couldn't help but be furious. The light in his eyes became colder, like a sword that could cut through the sky and pierce through the sun and moon. Kang Taechu, you are just a frog at the bottom of a well. You don't know how vast the universe is. You have never seen a true expert. If it was 100 years ago, it would be a little difficult for me to kill you. But now, in my eyes, you are just a dog that I can kill casually. As he spoke, the ancient bronze sword flew out of his hand and turned into sword Tao laws. These laws were all formed by small sword lights. They looked crystal clear and resplendent like the spring rain. The sword lights formed runes, and the runes condensed into laws. The laws seemed to have a mind of their own and were ever-changing. Sometimes, they were like dragons, sometimes they were like phoenixes dancing in the sky, sometimes they were like flames burning the sky, and sometimes they were like icy rivers flowing. The flying celestial sword laws danced and twisted around sword god intimately. They were completely under his control like his cute and loyal servants. Is this the power of a sacred weapon? Sacred weapon. A sacred weapon. This sword instantly attracted the attention of hundreds of thousands of cultivators. Countless people were shocked. A so-called Dao artifact contained a fragment of the great Dao. It was either formed by a soul formation grand cultivator refining his Dao fruit or left his body when he died and placed it in an artifact. Generally speaking, only soul formation cultivators could control and use Dao artifacts. If nascent soul cultivators forcefully used it, it would be extremely difficult. They could only use it once or twice and would even suffer a backlash, causing them to be severely injured and their cultivation realm to drop. As for sacred weapons, they contained a complete great Dao. They were usually formed by void return cultivators refining their Dao fruits. Their power was usually 10 or 100 times that of a Dao artifact. What was a great Dao? The end of the Dharma. The result of the infinite condensation of laws. There were only a few sacred weapons in the entire ruins of immortality. As a true sacred weapon, the flying celestial sword contained complete sword Dao laws. These N-Dao laws had already turned into a section of the sword Dao. The moment this sword appeared, the entire vast territory of the ruins of immortality. The swords of countless cultivators were wailing and sighing in admiration. They trembled slightly, as if in fear, as if in submission. The laws inside the sword cultivators' bodies and Dao treasure swords were slowly being drawn out. They rushed toward the mysterious heaven mountain range like carps worshipping a dragon and flowers worshipping a phoenix. How could Kong Teichu withstand the second strike of this sword? Many people were relieved that Jiang Tian was in danger this time. The god of swords stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were filled with arrogance. His white robe fluttered in the wind. His otherworldly handsomeness carried a hint of melancholy. He had a strange charm. However, powerful cultivators with sharp spiritual senses could sense a murderous aura gradually emerging from Sword God's body. Sword name, Flying Immortal. After I entered the ruins of immortality, I used this sword 3 times. The first time, I killed the great demon of the outer realm that had been under the deep space for 10,000 years. The second time, I defeated the headmaster's heaven-leveling ruler. The third time, I destroyed the 6 great grotto heavens with a single sword strike. The world only knows that my strength is similar to that of Teacher and the others. However, I don't know who in the entire ruins of immortality is qualified to stand shoulder to shoulder with the descendants of the Big Dipper. I can kill them with 1 strike. The moment he said that, everyone was shocked. What? Teacher fought with the God of Swords before? And he was defeated by the God of Swords? Many people looked at the God of Swords dumbfoundedly in disbelief. It turned out that they all thought that Teacher's strength was comparable to that of the Sword God of the Ruins Emperor's Palace. They didn't expect him to be no match for the God of Swords at all. How can Teacher be a match for the God of Swords? The God of Swords is a Big Dipper cultivator. His cultivation techniques are far superior to those of the ruins of immortality. If Master wasn't afraid that the news would be bad for Teacher's suppression of the ruins of immortality and subdue the world, he would have been defeated long ago. On the distant mountain, a few sword servants looked arrogant and sneered, looking down at the cultivators of the ruins of immortality as if they were ants. In the eyes of the empire of the ruins of immortality, Teacher was a symbol. After all, he was the right-hand man of the old ruins emperor. He had established the empire and his status was there. However, in terms of strength, he had lost to the God of Swords 1,000 years ago. It was just that the God of Immortals didn't announce it. A sacred body of the human race? Today, I'll kill you even if you have a sacred body of the human race. With that said, the God of Swords reached out and grabbed the hilt of his flying sword, slashing it at Jiang Tian. Immediately, a peerless might spread out, sweeping across the world and stirring up the surroundings. The sword beam was peerlessly sharp and dazzling, as if it could cut through the chaos and divide yin and yang. At that moment, the vast ruins of immortality's star trembled. Countless people felt the might of the supreme sacred weapon at the same time. Their hearts trembled and their guts were torn apart. Wherever the great Dao of Sword passed, the clouds within 100 miles were split apart. The sword chi surged into the clouds and the galaxy trembled slightly. That sword seemed to be able to tear the heavens and fall the stars. On the ground, the rocky peaks within 1,000 miles were flattened and shattered. Ravines intersected and formed an abyss. This is the ability to move mountains, fill seas, and turn land into rivers. Many cultivators were shocked to the extreme and lost their voices. How powerful was the god of swords of the ruins emperor's palace? Perhaps no one knew except for the old ruins emperor and the headmaster. Those who had fought with him before, such as the headmaster and the Grotto Heaven sect master, had kept it a secret. Today, after witnessing this domineering and destructive sword, they finally knew how terrifying the god of swords was. The god of swords comes from the Saint-Era sword sect. That's the legendary sword sect that stands at the top of the Big Dipper. It spans several stellar systems and has a legacy of hundreds of thousands of years. It's incomparably ancient and powerful and has the most powerful cultivation techniques. The power of the god of swords techniques is definitely beyond our imagination. Yanhua exclaimed. Even though the god of swords had once defeated the headmaster and Yanhuan, as the headmaster's disciple, felt indignant, he had to admit that the god of swords was powerful in the face of absolute power. When the other chancellors heard what was said, they were all silent and had mixed feelings in their hearts. Compared to the vast Big Dipper constellation and the legendary Saint-Era sword sect, even the vast ruins of Immortality and the Wood Spirit Galaxy before its destruction were too small. It was rumored that the god of swords was just a loser in the power struggle of the Saint-Era sword sect. In short, he couldn't survive in the Saint-Era sword sect and had to escape to the outer region and come to the ruins of Immortality. However, the god of swords' sword was enough to suppress the entire ruins of Immortality, destroy the 100 Moons Academy and flatten the 6 Grotto Heavens. Your Majesty, be careful. At this moment, Bai Mushua exclaimed and her pretty face turned pale. Even though many of the assassins knew that Jiang Tian was powerful, they still looked a little nervous. After all, Jiang Tian was facing the god of swords of the Emperor of Ruins Palace, an invincible legend in the ruins of Immortality. Good timing. Jiang Tian's eyes shone brightly and he shouted softly. His nascent soul suddenly shone brightly and a divine disk appeared behind the closed eyes of the nascent soul. The divine disk shone brightly and 9 divine-grade Dharma laws gathered and coiled around it. A torrential power filled Jiang Tian's spirit embryo. It was the first time Jiang Tian used the power of laws. Open! Jiang Tian shouted in a low voice. Then, layers of colorful domains appeared around Jiang Tian. They were like tight walls, firmly protecting Jiang Tian within them. The god of swords' sword Qi, chilling sword radiance, and peerlessly sharp sword Dharma laws hit the overlapping domains and produced a sound like metal and stone colliding. First, a whirlpool-like black hole appeared. It was the Tao Tai divine law that swallowed the countless sword Qi like a whale swallowing a cow. Then, a Gengjin immortal divine emperor with a crown on his head and golden armor appeared. He wielded a long saber and slashed with his saber, shattering many sword Dharma laws. In the end, a vermilion bird soared into the sky, driving out scarlet flames. The flames refined the heavens and burned the remaining sword radiance into ashes. Jiang Tian had 9 layers of domains and Dharma laws, but the god of swords' sword only touched 3 layers and was completely annihilated. What kind of Dharma is this? It can destroy Dharma laws. How can this domain be so magical? Normal nascent soul cultivators only have 1 layer of domains, but Kong Teichu has 9 layers of domains. How is that possible? Many spectators widened their eyes. Even the god of swords was shocked and didn't dare to underestimate Jiang Tian anymore. Chapter 1624. Every nascent soul cultivator had to understand a kind of Dharma law and form a forbidden zone because of their main cultivation art. The master created the Dian Dao law to break the shackles. Nascent soul cultivators could understand and control many kinds of Dharma laws to form multiple forbidden zones, and soul formation cultivators could form multidimensional domains. However, the master and his disciples could understand many kinds of Dharma laws, but they couldn't form multiple forbidden zones or domains. Even when the master occasionally formed multiple domains, they were relatively weak and couldn't withstand a single blow. But Jiang Tian was able to activate 9 forbidden zones in an instant, and each of them was extremely powerful. This was unheard of. No, this isn't a forbidden zone, but a domain. I'm afraid he's a sacred-grade nascent soul cultivator. The sword god frowned slightly. Ripples rippled in his heart, and he could not calm down. But even a sacred-grade nascent soul cultivator can only form 2 or 3 forbidden zones. 9 forbidden zones are just legends in the Beidou planet region. It hasn't appeared in tens of thousands of years. The key is that the devouring power, heavenly fire, and aged metal, these 3 completely different laws, are completely integrated without any conflict. The 9 kinds of Dharma laws can even combine yin and yang and transform with each other, giving people the feeling that they're endless. It's really strange and amazing. In the blink of an eye, many thoughts flashed through the sword god's mind, but his reaction wasn't slow in the slightest. He flicked his fingers repeatedly, as if he was playing a pipa, lightly playing on the brilliant flying immortal. Swish. Every time he flicked, the flying deity turned into a small sword. After flicking it 9 times, it turned into 9 small swords. Under the control of the sword god's Dharma power, the 9 flying swords created a long crack in the dimension and flew towards Jiang Tian. The small flying swords tore the dimension and whistled in the sky like supersonic fighter jets. With his speed, it was as if the distance of 100 miles did not exist. The 9 flying swords arrived in front of Jiang Tian in the blink of an eye. Many people realized what was going on and couldn't help but exclaim. It turned out that the flying deity was formed by 9 supreme-grade Dao artifacts. No wonder it was so powerful and had reached the level of a sacred weapon. This kind of exquisite artifact-making method couldn't be done in the ruins of deity. Only the Beidou planet region had it. Boom! Jiang Tian stood motionless, allowing the 9 flying swords to pierce his 9-fold domain. Immediately, the 9 domains began to tremble slightly. Each of the 9 flying swords was as fast as a shooting star, but they were as heavy as Mount Tai. They contained the great Tao of sword, and their power was terrifying. In the end, cracks appeared on the 9 domains, as if they were about to collapse. This old man has some experience. Jiang Tian's expression was slightly stern, but he didn't panic. He just stopped being casual and became slightly more serious. Although Jiang Tian had condensed a divine-grade nomological law, controlled space, and formed a domain in the nascent soul realm, it was still a nomological law and not a great Tao. The sword god, on the other hand, had formed his nascent soul with a transcendent-grade golden core. Then, he advanced to the nascent soul stage and the soul formation stage. He had mastered transcendent-grade Dharma laws and great Tao. His strength was far beyond that of ordinary soul formation stage cultivators. Coupled with the might of a holy weapon, Jiang Tian's law domain was still hard to resist. Return to origin. A cold light flashed in Jiang Tian's eyes as he shouted softly. The 9 types of nomological laws instantly converged into the divine disk in the nascent soul. With a spin, they returned to origin and merged into one, sublimating to the limit and turning into chaotic divine laws. Break! In the next moment, Jiang Tian swung his sword. Yin and Yang triad combination, which was yin and which was yang. Jiang Tian's sword was filled with chaotic aura. It was both masculine and domineering, but also feminine and flexible. It was difficult to separate the two. In the sword god's perception, Jiang Tian's sword contained a complicated feeling of all things being chaotic, the creation of heaven and earth, the birth of yin and yang, and the ultimate creation. This kind of vast nomological law made his heart feel unusually heavy. Clang. Chaos surged, and the divine laws were tyrannical. As the sharp aura of the absolute heaven sword slashed out, one of the sword god's flying swords was immediately sent flying into the sky like a shooting star. Again! Jiang Tian shouted. His black hair fluttered, and his battle intent surged. His sword shot out like a bolt of lightning, blocking, slashing, slicing, sweeping, parrying, piercing, horizontal, and drilling. There were endless changes, and it was too much for the eyes to take in. His sword moves were wide open, but they were also exquisite. The chaotic divine laws were either piercing like fine drizzles or surging like an unrestrained ocean. They also changed according to his will. The sword god's gaze was cold as he stood proudly in the sky. He flicked his fingers and waved his hand as if he was playing a zither. Every movement was filled with Tao, and every posture was harmonious and perfect. It was as if he was one with the heavens and the Tao was natural. His sword moves were notes, sword moves were small parts, and nomological laws and great Daoists were musical pieces. The sword god's face was as cold as iron. Every time he flicked his fingers, he would control a flying sword to attack from a tricky angle. Even though there were only 9 swords, the sword moves of every treasured sword contained a myriad of changes. Numerous types of sword laws interweaved like a net, and it gave everyone the feeling that there were swords everywhere in the world that covered the heavens and the earth as they attacked. Even if they weren't facing the fairy realm directly, everyone's hearts were in their mouths when they felt that peerless killing intent. Their hearts trembled violently as if they'd fallen into an ice cellar, and their entire bodies went cold while their scalps went numb. Many people revealed expressions of admiration and yearning. The sword god was worthy of being called the sword god to be able to control 9 top-grade Dao artifacts at the same time and move them as if they were his arms. Especially the sword cultivators, they were even more fixated on the battle. They wanted to firmly remember every single movement of the sword god so that they could carefully study and comprehend it in the future. They would surely obtain great gains and advance greatly. Clang, clang, clang. Rapid and enormous sounds shook the sky as the absolute heaven sword and the 9 flying celestial swords collided rapidly. Clang. That area was filled with spatial cracks, and there were even spatial hurricanes that were whistling and whistling. They were blurry and distorted as if they were about to collapse. All sorts of nomological laws were boiling, and the great Daoists in the world trembled uneasily. The dome of heaven trembled, and the stars became dim and misty, as if they were about to fall. Suddenly, the 9 flying celestial swords opened up colorful spatial cracks and flew in all directions. They were actually all scattered by Jiang Tian's absolute heaven sword. And Jiang Tian soared into the sky like a dragon soaring into the sky. He used the Kunpeng's extreme speed and transformed into a golden flowing light that charged towards the sword god. Your battle awareness is not bad. The sword god revealed a look of admiration. Jiang Tian's physique was strong, and he was invincible in close combat. He abandoned the competition of nomological domains and chose to fight in close combat, which was to use his strengths to attack the other party's weaknesses. Although he praised in his heart, the sword god did not show any mercy. His right hand reached into the void, and the 9 flying swords landed in front of him like swallows returning to the forest and tired birds returning to their nest. They once again formed the flying celestial sword that shone brilliantly in the sky. The sword aura, nomological laws, and great Daoists were actually several times denser and more majestic than before. They were like dragons that charged towards Jiang Tian. Kill! Under everyone's incredulous gazes, Jiang Tian wielded the absolute heaven sword and cut through layers of nomological laws and great Daoists. He cut through all obstacles and crushed all the sword auras and sword chi, and in almost 3 flicks of his fingers, he arrived in front of the sword god. Jiang Tian slashed down with his sword. Sword chi traverses 30,000 miles, 1 sword across the sky, invincible. The sword god frowned fiercely. With the flying celestial sword in his hand, his aura instantly soared. He was powerful, otherworldly, elegant, and holy, as if a true god had descended to this world and was looking down on the billions of people with compassion. He was also like a banished immortal walking in the mortal world that was about to ascend. He slashed towards Jiang Tian's absolute heaven sword with his sword. The nomological laws of the sword had reached the limit and were extremely pure, condensing into a great Tao that was peerlessly sharp and murderous. Under this sword, the space of dozens of miles was instantly torn apart, and a terrifying spatial hurricane raged. If a golden core cultivator fell into it, his body would be blown apart, his flesh would be torn apart, and his divine soul would be annihilated. At this moment, the world was in chaos. The nomological laws roared and the great Tao rumbled. Everything was collapsing as if the end of the world had arrived. Clang! The absolute heaven sword and the flying celestial sword collided heavily, and a close-range battle broke out. Boom! At this moment, the chaotic aura in Jiang Tian's spirit embryo exploded, and nomological laws lingered as if it was nurturing a small world. His chaotic divine body flowed with a dark gold color and shone with a treasure light. It was as if a Buddha had descended, and there seemed to be a bright galaxy surging under his skin. In the end, the vast and surging power of the chaotic divine nomological laws poured into the absolute heaven sword. Bang! All kinds of Tao patterns and nomological laws on the flying deity sword emitted a bright light. There were cheilants roaring, red-crowned cranes dancing in the sky, azure dragons soaring and black tortoises condensing, and all kinds of strange phenomena appeared. In the end, it was even to the extent that the images of ancient gods appeared. Some were chanting incantations that sounded like the chanting of Buddhist scriptures, and they had benevolent and kind expressions. Some attacked fiercely, and they roared, and they seemed like vajras that were glaring with rage and wanted to annihilate demons and devils. These were the external manifestations of the sword Tao, and it even involved spiritual attacks. It was used to disintegrate Jiang Tian's battle consciousness and spiritual battle, which was extremely magical. But under the peerless sharpness of the absolute heaven sword, everything was useless. With a cracking sound, the flying deity sword, which was known as the top sacred weapon of the ruins of immortality, couldn't withstand it. All kinds of phantoms, phenomena, nomological laws and Tao patterns were destroyed. The ancient bronze sword body suddenly disintegrated and exploded, turning into 9 flying swords that shot in all directions. The sword god, who was close at hand, was covered in blood by the chaotic sword chi of the absolute heaven sword. He was pushed back like a meteor and almost fell from the sky. At this moment, whether it was the spectators around the Xiantian mountain range battlefield, or the cultivators and mortals watching through the light screens, billions of people in the vast ruins of immortality were stunned at the same time. The sword god had lost. Chapter 1625. At this moment, the entire ruins of immortality was dead silent. Countless cultivators were dumbfounded. No one had imagined such a situation. When Jiang Tian challenged Divine Emperor Lai Hua in the Xiantian mountain range, everyone thought that Jiang Tian was crazy and that he was like an ant trying to shake a tree. After all, not long ago, Jiang Tian had almost died under the siege of the 3 sword servants, Tong Yujian, the Grand Chancellor of the Academy, Black and White, and Ban Shan. As a Divine Emperor Lai Hua's strength was more than enough to crush the 3 of them. However, Jiang Tian had managed to kill the Inferno Godly Emperor with his powerful physical body and without using any divine ability laws. Moreover, he had suppressed the 6 grotto heavens and was invincible. When the headmaster came to fight Jiang Tian with evil intentions, many people thought that Jiang Tian was no match for him. After all, he was a sage who stood at the top of all Daoists in the ruins of immortality, one of the 3 giants. However, they didn't expect that Jiang Tian would see through the headmaster's plan and take the initiative to attack. In just a few seconds, he destroyed thousands of invisible battleships and war machines and used the divine artifact, the Absolute Heaven Sword, to reduce the headmaster's cultivation level again and again. In the end, the headmaster's body and soul were destroyed, ending a legend. However, by then Jiang Tian had fought 3 battles in a row. Whether it was Divine Emperor Lai Hua or the soul formation cultivators of the 6 grotto heavens, none of them were weak. To put it bluntly, this was a battle of attrition. Jiang Tian fought against the soul formation cultivators of the ruins of immortality with only 1 sword. Especially in the battle against the headmaster and the invisible battleships, Jiang Tian, a nascent soul cultivator, used the divine artifact, the Absolute Heaven Sword, by force. He had consumed a lot of energy and dharma power. He was already at the end of his rope. In everyone's eyes, Jiang Tian had held on for so long. If he were to face the sword god, who was the most powerful giant in the ruins of immortality, who had a holy weapon, the inheritance of the Big Dipper constellation, and the most powerful giant in the ruins of immortality. Jiang Tian was like a person who had just finished a 10,000-meter marathon. But he never thought that it would turn out like this. Although this was a battle of life and death, and not a competition between sects and clans that was treated to a meal, there was no need to talk about fairness, rules, or morality. However, the fact that Jiang Tian could hold on until now and even defeat the sword god with a single strike still filled the cultivators of the ruins of immortality with shock and fear. No, the strength of the sword god is not just limited to this. Under the magnificent light screen of the academy, Grand Chancellor Xian Hu squinted his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Back then, the battle between the headmaster of academy and the god of swords was not well known. However, because it was easy to be injured in such a battle, Xian Hu Chancellor, who was proficient in the art of healing, was able to witness the battle. The eyes of the other chancellors were filled with reverence. Only the core disciples of the headmaster of the academy knew how powerful the headmaster of the academy was. They also knew how terrifying the sword deity, who could destroy heaven and earth with one sword and cut down the sky-leveling ruler, was. At that time, the headmaster of the academy had already comprehended the Dian Dao law and experienced the War of the Dao damage era. Regardless of cultivation, strength, battle experience, and awareness, they were all at the peak of perfection. The headmaster of the academy, who stood at the peak of all Dao, was defeated by the sword god with one strike. How could the sword god be defeated so easily? The reason why Jiang Tian defeated the headmaster of academy was because of his battle skills. Jiang Tian took the headmaster of academy by surprise and took the initiative. After severely injuring the headmaster of academy, he did not show any mercy and killed without fear. Regardless of cultivation realm, it could be said that in terms of battle strength, Jiang Tian might not be able to defeat the headmaster of academy. If they were to fight again, Jiang Tian might not be able to win. As expected, 100 miles away, the clouds suddenly broke open. A long dragon of sword qi cut through the sky and arrived above the Xintian mountain range. The sword god stood proudly on the long dragon of sword qi. His white robe was whiter than snow. Although the blood stains were like blooming plum blossoms, his eyes were sharp and his face was as calm as a lake. Even his qi and blood were not depleted. He did not look defeated at all. The sword god is invincible and undefeatable. At that moment, countless cultivators of the ruins of deity cheered as if they had found their backbone. "Grandpa Sword God, kill that bastard Kong Teichu." Many people were so excited that they cried. If the sword god was defeated, they really didn't know what else they could rely on. The defeated army was like a collapsing mountain. The remaining army was at the end of their road. Their fighting spirit had been weakened. No matter how many soul formation cultivators there were, even if there were dozens of them, it would be useless. Jiang Tian could totally avoid their attacks first and then defeat them one by one. In the end, he would break into the Emperor Palace of the ruins, change the sun and moon and change the dynasty. Kong Teichu, you're indeed a genius. No wonder you're so arrogant. However, you're still far from being able to defeat me, let alone fighting with the most talented elite and sacred prince of the Big Dipper planet region. The sword god was calm and collected, as if he was holding a pearl of wisdom and had a card up his sleeve. He had traveled across planet regions and experienced too many ups and downs in his life. Even though his sword skills and temperament were sharp, that was only because of his sword cultivation art. In fact, his Daoist heart was as firm as a rock. It was only half a move weaker than Jiang Tian's and couldn't shake his Daoist heart at all. On the contrary, Jiang Tian seemed to be a bit exhausted after slashing with the chaotic divine law. His face was pale and the glow on the surface of his body dimmed. He was exhausted and the Dharma in his spirit embryo was faintly discernible, as if it was unstable. Really? Jiang Tian activated his art and the Taotai origin returning law stirred and rolled in his spirit embryo. The chaotic creation art and the great sun furnace were also activated. In just a few seconds, the blood, spirit and vast Dharma power of the divine Emperor Lai Hua and the other soul formation cultivators were all absorbed and refined. Jiang Tian's state was rising and he returned to his peak state. His breath was long and his body was shining with a golden glow. It was crystal clear and there seemed to be a river of stars shining inside, making him extremely tough. So evil. The sword god's pupils contracted and he was full of disbelief. Devouring other people's bodies, blood, true essence, dharma laws and divine powers to increase one's strength, regain one's youth and extend one's lifespan. This kind of art wasn't unheard of in the Big Dipper galaxy. However, this kind of art was too ruthless and went against the laws of nature. It would often form a loophole in one's Dao heart, making the cultivator full of demonic nature and evil aura. They would become ugly, cruel and bloodthirsty. They could even be invaded by external demons and go mad until they died. As for Jiang Tian, he quickly absorbed and refined the flesh, true essence and divine ability laws of others, yet he didn't have a trace of evil or devilish nature. Instead, he was just and gentle, and he was even handsome and otherworldly like an immortal. He was the only one of his kind. If the sword god could get his hands on this art, he would be able to enter the void return realm soon. Thinking of this, the sword god's heart was burning with passion. An imperceptible greed flashed through his originally clear eyes. The sharpness faded a little as he said gently, "Jiang Taichu, if you hand over your cultivation technique, I won't kill you. We'll be on the same level as you and rule the ruins of deity together. I'll even take you to the Big Dipper galaxy to see the vast universe, endless Dao, and climb the long immortal path together. What do you think? It's not impossible to learn my art. Kneel down and call me Daddy." Jiang Tian chuckled. Ridiculous. What was the Big Dipper galaxy? In the sword god's eyes, it was a cultivation's sacred ground, but in Jiang Tian's eyes, it was just a remote village. If Earth was a newbie village and the ruins of deity was a small town, the Big Dipper galaxy was just a county, not much better than the ruins of deity. Therefore, Jiang Tian didn't take the Big Dipper galaxy seriously at all. Jiang Tian wanted to go to the Central Galaxy, the vast continent that could give birth to chaotic matter and immortal materials that could improve his chaotic divine body. In his previous life, Jiang Tian had been in the Central Galaxy for thousands of years. Later, he ascended to the Celestial Realm and the Divine Realm and looked down on the Central Galaxy as if it were his own palm. He was very familiar with everything there. He knew exactly which year and which place the treasure would be unearthed, which genius was about to be born, which cultivation technique was incomplete, which sect, aristocratic family, and dynasty's history and sequence of events. He knew all of this clearly and he had the upper hand. Wasn't it better to go to the Central Galaxy? What was the point of going to the Big Dipper galaxy? Stubborn. Although he knew that Jiang Tian was messing with his mind, the sword god couldn't help but twitch his mouth when he heard Jiang Tian's vulgar tone. He sneered. "You're indeed a native born in a remote and desolate place. You're just like a country bumpkin, a wild animal, and unfit to be a human. You talk too much. There's no such thing as being born noble or despicable in this world. In the end, the winner is the king and the loser is the bandit. The strong are respected and the weak are like ants. Today, I'm going to step on you. How can you be noble?" Jiang Tian sneered and flicked his sword. The sword let out a series of roars and dragon roars. His fighting spirit was surging and rising. He had cultivated for 10,000 years and lived 2 lives as a human. His knowledge was vast and his heart was broad. He had seen too many dynasties fall, mountains and rivers change masters, and the hierarchy was reversed. In the old days, Wang Xie Tang Qian Yen flew into the homes of ordinary people. He was calm. What the sword god said didn't affect him at all. "You're a sacred grade nascent soul cultivator. You should know that there are 9 levels of soul formation too. And I'm a transcendent above the 9th level." The sword god shook his head with pity, as if Jiang Tian would definitely die in his hands. He said, "There's a huge difference between each level. A transcendent soul formation cultivator is like a perfected immortal. I forgot to tell you that I was only using the power of a normal low-grade god. Next, I'll show you the real power of a transcendent god." As he spoke, a powerful aura began to rise from the sword god's body. Waves of dazzling and resplendent laws surged up from the trembling ground of the ruins of immortality. They were as thick as the Milky Way and intertwined like divine chains as they poured towards the sword god. Chapter 1626. Boom. When Sword God activated the Dharma laws of the ruins of deity, he turned into a pillar of light that seemed to reach the 9 heavens and the yellow springs. With the Sword God as the center, a huge vortex of laws was formed in the vast sky for thousands of miles. Sword God stood in the middle of the vortex and bathed in the pillar of light, giving people a feeling of holiness, greatness, and vastness, as if he were a deity, the only one in the world. But that wasn't the end. The 9 flying deity swords that had escaped to various parts of the Xintian mountain range returned to his hands. Sword God raised his sword and looked at Jiang Tian coldly, as if he were looking at an ant that was struggling before its death. Kong Teichu, I don't know what kind of opportunity you encountered, or even if you were a deity who fell into the human world. That's why you have such a miraculous constitution and supreme cultivation art. But your path has been too smooth and you haven't been through any hardships. You don't know that the strong are easy to break. You shouldn't have provoked me right after becoming a nascent soul cultivator. The flying deity sword is a middle-grade sacred weapon of our sect. It's too sharp and can hurt people easily. When the ancestral master refined it, he added 3 layers of seals on it. It only showed the power of a middle-grade sacred weapon after it was fully opened. I only opened the first layer just now. Clang. The sword god formed a seal with his right hand that was filled with harmonious Daoist connotation as if it was in harmony with the heavens and earth. He then slashed at the 9 swords of flying fairy. The ancient bronze was like the bark of a roasted tree as it disintegrated and shattered, revealing the dazzling and resplendent body of the sword that was like precious gold. A peerless aura of slaughter shot into the sky and terrified the mind. What a terrifying sword chi! I feel like my divine soul is being cut open. Even though those soul formation overlords had retreated 1,000 miles away, they were still terrified and uneasy, as if a little rabbit was being targeted by a tiger. This is the real power of a sacred weapon. In an instant, countless nascent soul cultivators, golden core cultivators and foundation establishment cultivators knelt on the ground and worshipped. Their minds weren't strong enough, so the feeling was even more obvious. It was as if they were weak mortals facing an omnipotent true god. They felt insignificant and rude. That wasn't an illusion. An attack from a holy weapon was equivalent to a casual attack from a return to void stage cultivator. The only difference was that Dharma treasures and Dao weapons were external objects after all. Soul formation realm cultivators could only use divine weapons for a limited number of times and they might even suffer from a backlash. They wouldn't be able to use them endlessly like void return cultivators. However, the sword god was not afraid of the backlash. He was a veteran supergrade soul formation stage cultivator who was not far away from the void return level. Although it was a bit difficult for him to use the holy weapon, the gap was not too big. On the other hand, Jiang Tian was only a nascent soul stage cultivator, but he was using an immortal artifact. It was like a mayfly dragging a tree. Even if there was a backlash, it would be because of Jiang Tian. As the seal of the 9 swords of flying celestial was peeled off, the sword god also felt a wave of pressure. The corners of his mouth were tightly pursed, revealing deep wrinkles. His right hand seemed to be suppressed by a mountain, trembling as it stretched out with difficulty and flicked repeatedly. 9 monstrous sword auras shot up into the sky, blooming with dazzling light that illuminated the area within 1,000 miles. The sword auras and sword chi turned into sword pillars that penetrated the heavens and the earth, as if they could pierce through the heavens and the universe. Black tortoise, white tiger, fire phoenix. All kinds of strange phenomena appeared. They were the exterior of the Dharma and Tao, resonating and entangling with each other. The Dharma is endless, the Dharma is infinite, and the sword techniques are as vast as the sea. I have been searching for the sword Tao all my life and have come into contact with more than tens of thousands of swordsmen. However, in the end, I understood the principle of returning to simplicity and going from complexity to simplicity. I specialized in one move, the yin-yang slash. I have specialized in this move for 3,000 years. The sword god's every word was like a dragon's roar of sword chi, sonorous and shocking. As he spoke, blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that he had used up his blood essence. However, he didn't panic or feel dejected. Instead, his eyes were filled with confidence and a hint of pride appeared on his face. Because he knew that Jiang Tian would definitely die when he slashed with his sword. As his words fell, the many strange phenomena disintegrated into the dharma of yin and yang. Suddenly, heaven and earth turned upside down and chaos boiled. It was as if a golden crow and a jade rabbit appeared in the void together, and the sun rose and the moon set. The two kinds of dharma phenomena charged toward Jiang Tian, rising and falling, alternating between each other as if they were in a cycle. The power of a transcendent grade soul formation cultivator. The power of a middle-grade sacred weapon. And the supreme technique of the Big Dipper star domain, the yin-yang slash. The three combined into one and stacked together. How terrifying was its power! It was peerlessly sharp and unstoppable. It was as if even the old ruins emperor would be cut in half by the sword. Even if the many sages of the ancient celestial court joined forces, they wouldn't be able to withstand such a strike. Master is burning his lifeblood essence and going all out this time. A sword servant with a sharp gaze exclaimed with certainty. Kong Teichu, you should feel honored to be able to force my master to use his full strength. A young sword servant snorted coldly. The other sword servants nodded in agreement. Kong Teichu is dead for sure this time. Jade Lotus Fairy's eyes were cold as a maniacal smile appeared on her pretty face, as if she had gotten her revenge. Ah, sword god is too strong. That's the yin-yang slash. Beside her, Xian Hu and the other chancellors were trembling, ashamed of their inferiority. Back then, teacher had lost to sword god. As teacher's disciples, they were unconvinced and thought that if they cultivated diligently, they would one day surpass sword god and wipe away the shame of the academy. At the very least, they thought that teacher had lost because of a moment of carelessness and there was still hope for him to win. But at this moment, seeing this strike, it seemed to be able to create yin and yang, create the world, reverse karma, and transcend time. Only then did they realize that they were really too far away from sword god. Even teacher was very far away. They couldn't help but admit defeat. At this moment, the yin and yang sword aura had already reached, intertwining with each other, majestically attacking and destroying Jiang Tian. Jiang Tian seemed to be locked by the yin and yang dharma as he stood motionless in the void. The sun rose and the moon set in an endless cycle. He seemed to be in the torrent of time, constantly accelerating. 10,000 years passed in a blink of an eye as he rapidly aged and weakened. The torrent of time accelerates, yin and yang obliterates. An old chancellor of the academy, whose lifespan was unknown, sighed for the living fossil of teacher's generation and felt a chill in his heart. This was the ultimate killing move of the Saint-Era sword sect, a top-secret skill, just like the 9 major heavenly skills in the ruins Emperor's Palace. Everything could be divided into yin and yang. Even if you had a protective Daoist artifact, dharma, and forbidden zone, under the obliteration of yin and yang, they would be separated into yin and yang dharma, devoured and used. And sword god's dharma of sword was nourished to become even stronger, even simulating the movement of the sun and the moon, causing the flow of time to accelerate, making the devouring faster and more ruthless. They recalled the scene of teacher's crushing defeat and their faces darkened. At that time, teacher had taken out more than 10 Taoist treasures and dharma, including the sky-leveling ruler, and even the overlord's relic, but they still couldn't withstand the power of sword god sword. The dharma and dharma fragments contained in the dharma treasures such as the sky-leveling ruler were disintegrated and separated, almost becoming ordinary weapons. If teacher hadn't admitted defeat and sword god reversed yin and yang, teacher would have been severely injured. Once the yin-yang time slash was unleashed, it was incomparably mysterious and terrifying, disintegrating yin and yang and disappearing the dharma of divine power. The assassins' hearts tightened and their faces turned pale. They felt as if their hearts were being squeezed and were about to explode. Bai Muxue and Long Xingnan, who had lower cultivation levels, felt as if their bodies were about to disintegrate. The essence, qi and dharma that they had previously condensed were about to be devoured. If it wasn't for the protection of the primordial aura of chaos hanging down from the Motherstone tripod, they would have been torn into pieces and disintegrated into yin and yang. Too powerful. Too powerful. Kong Teichu must die. Slash. This sword is like the sword of a deity. It can destroy and destroy everything. It can even kill the legendary Void Return cultivators. At that moment, the cultivators around the Xiantian mountain range, who were thousands of miles away from Sword God and Jiangtian, felt the power of the disintegration of yin and yang and couldn't help but sigh. Almost all the cultivators, from the soul formation cultivators to the qi refinement cultivators, thought that Jiangtian would definitely die after knowing how terrifying the yin-yang cut was. Many members of the royal family who were watching the battle in the emperor's palace heaved a sigh of relief. Some young members of the royal family who weren't strong enough were already excited. They clenched their fists and were about to pass down the order to organize a banquet and celebrate with the entire country. Under the expectant gazes of countless cultivators from the ruins of immortality, by Mushue's worried gaze and the exclamations of the great Co-country, the 9 domains and endless laws around Jiangtian gradually disappeared under the dharma power of the yin-yang cut, like snow under the scorching sun, as if they couldn't withstand a single blow. The laws of yin and yang contained the meaning of the passage of time. They had already wrapped Jiangtian and were spinning like a small ball. In the next moment, they were about to destroy Jiangtian's body, spirit embryo and nascent soul. So you've been hiding your strength. Jiangtian suddenly smiled, revealing his neat white teeth. He was as bright as the young man next door. But it made many people's hearts sink and they had a bad feeling. Jiangtian smiled and said sincerely, "So we're the same kind of people. I've been hiding my strength too. From the beginning to the end, you only saw me casting laws. Did you see me activate my nascent soul?" Sword God was also shocked at that moment. He's just pretending. But at that moment, he was extremely unwilling to turn around and run away. He had already slashed out with his most powerful sword. No matter what, he had to see the outcome. If he couldn't win, it wouldn't be too late to run away. Then, rays of bright divine light suddenly appeared from the small ball formed by the laws of yin and yang. The divine light was extremely bright and dazzling. It was so sharp, so dazzling, and so heavy that even the yin-yang ball, which was so dense that it could crush a star, couldn't hide it. Everyone looked up and only saw 1 ray, 2 rays, 3 rays. In the end, countless rays of chaotic Tao divine light appeared and illuminated the entire yin-yang ball. Even Jiangtian's body and spirit embryo became translucent. In the end, a tiny nascent soul that was like a baby could be vaguely seen sitting in the center of Jiangtian's spirit embryo with its eyes closed. The divine infant was made entirely out of chaotic qi. It was only about 7 to 8 inches in size, but it had 9 orifices. There were eyes on its forehead and navel, making it look like a divine infant that had descended from the 9 heavens. At that moment, the nascent soul suddenly opened its eyes. Chapter 1627. Humans were born with 7 orifices. Ears, nose, eyes, mouth and tongue were the important organs that humans use to sense the outside world and absorb energy. In the eyes of cultivators, each orifice was naturally connected to the Tao of the universe and had all kinds of unbelievable potential. So, cultivators had many cultivation arts that started from the 7 orifices. For example, when Buddhists opened their mouth orifices, they would have the King Kong lion roar. When cultivators opened their eyes orifices, they would have the purple lightning eyes. They could be used to kill enemies and sense and observe. When the 5 senses, 6 senses and 7 orifices were cultivated to the extreme, they would be extremely sensitive and powerful. It was said that void-returning saints could see an entire galaxy with one glance, as if they were looking at their own palm prints. If they were on Earth, they would be able to sense everything on Pluto. Dao reunion perfected immortals were even more terrifying. They could see hundreds of galaxies and billions of planets with one glance. The deities of the deity realm above heaven were even more omniscient and omnipotent. So, the cultivation arts that cultivated the 7 orifices were considered the top cultivation arts in the entire universe. And yet, Jiang Tian's chaotic divine infant was born with 9 orifices. It had 2 more eyes than normal people. One was in his belly button and the other was in his forehead. That was too terrifying. It was the baby of a Khanate deity, as if it could create everything and had all kinds of unbelievable power. If Jiang Tian's immortal will hadn't been connected with his, it would have already flown into the sky and traveled through the star ocean, killing nascent soul and soul formation cultivators as easily as killing chickens. It could even dominate the central galaxy and become an ancestor, going through the tribulation and ascending in the future. Boom. When the 9 orifices divine infant opened its eyes, the Tao in the world resonated with it. It seemed to be a part of the world, born from the essence of the sun and the moon. In other words, it was the master of the world. Even the world had to listen to its orders and respect it, trembling under its power. 9 beams of light formed by the chaotic divine laws were shot out from the 9 orifices of the divine infant. They were as sharp as heavenly swords, moving towards the ball of yin and yang laws. Like a sharp chainsaw, it easily cut the yin and yang laws into pieces and dissipated in the air. Yin-yang/break. What? The sword god of the Emperor Palace was startled. He had never thought that the situation would turn out like this. What kind of nascent soul are you? Why is your power so terrifying? He asked subconsciously, his voice trembling. He was not an ordinary semi-god realm warrior. Instead, he was a super-grade soul formation stage cultivator, second only to a sacred-grade soul formation stage cultivator. He could even escape from a half-step void return cultivator. Such a powerful supreme-grade soul formation cultivator, together with the flying deity sword, a sacred weapon that was completely unsealed, and the supreme secret art of the Saint-Era sword sect that was burning his own blood essence, could definitely kill a sacred-grade nascent soul cultivator. But it was still broken by Jiang Tian. It left Sword God of the Ruins Emperor Palace in disbelief, as though he had fallen into a nightmare. It wasn't just the Sword God. At this moment, all of the billions of cultivators and mortals in the ruins of immortality were stunned. This Kang Teichu can actually break the yin-yang time/. In the academy, under the light screen, Xian Hu, Jade Lotus Fairy, Yan Hua and the other chancellors were all dumbfounded, as if they were mortals who had seen a legend. Master's strongest move was actually broken. The sword servants were all dumbfounded, feeling a bone-chilling fear. The terrifying power that Jiang Tian displayed was something that they had never seen before in the sword god's body. It was simply like a legend. You have never heard of my nascent soul, but I only told you that it can kill a sacred-grade soul formation stage cultivator. May I ask, are you? With his hands behind his back, Jiang Tian walked out of the messy fragments of yin and yang dharma. Chaotic aura surrounded him as he approached Sword God step by step. What? You can kill a sacred-grade soul formation stage cultivator? What kind of nascent soul is that? Are you really an immortal? Sword God was shocked and completely panicked. A sacred-grade soul formation stage cultivator. In the history of the Big Dipper planet, there had only been a handful of people like that. It was rumored that they had a 100% chance of reaching the void return level, second only to the legendary son of an immortal and much higher than him. That was the difference between a saint and a mortal, between heaven and earth. And yet, Jiang Tian said that his nascent soul could kill a sacred-grade soul formation stage cultivator, which scared him out of his wits. You said that the world is big, but in my eyes, it's just an inch away. Your so-called talents in the Big Dipper planet are just trash that I can stomp to death. I don't know why you are so proud. Jiang Tian said coldly as he bathed in the chaotic light. He was like the god of creation, and his aura was overwhelming. Kill! The sword god's shock and anger turned into boundless killing intent as he suddenly attacked Jiang Tian. When masters fought, there was no retreat. There was only going forward and no turning back. The so-called running people in the world of cultivators were actually running thousands of kilometers away to avoid the enemy's attack without being noticed. How could it be easy to escape when they were in a battle? Hesitation, fear, and the intention to retreat would create loopholes in one's Daoist heart and put them in a passive position in the battle. One turn, one loophole, and he would be killed. Sky Luo Sword Art. Big Dipper Sword. Mortal Dust Fall Sword. In an instant, Sword God seemed to have gone crazy. His hair fluttered and his sleeves fluttered. He burned his blood essence crazily and threw out 7 or 8 supreme sword arts in a row. Those sword arts and sword arts had never appeared in the ruins of immortality. Many cultivators had never heard of or seen them before. They were extremely profound, which opened the eyes of the cultivators in the ruins of immortality and made them fascinated. As expected of the successor of the Big Dipper Sword sect, he has mastered so many sword arts. A living fossil said with a serious look in his eyes. In the void, the colorful great Tao of swords stirred up the sky, tearing it apart as if it could shatter the stars and the moon. All kinds of spatial storms were created. Even a semi-god realm warrior would be torn to pieces if he fell into it. Indeed, sword god sword arts were too terrifying. Between heaven and earth, pillars of sword laws were peerlessly sharp and extremely powerful. They roared and rotated, easily tearing the space apart. However, Sword God had also consumed a lot of energy. He began to roar with a kind of madness, and he no longer had his original elegance and otherworldly appearance. In fact, he had already burned his blood essence to use the yin-yang time slash. At this moment, he was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Every time he used a saint weapon above his level, it was extremely strenuous. He could no longer use the yin-yang time slash a second time. You're still resisting in vain. You have no idea what you're facing. Jiang Tian was enveloped in chaotic divine light as he walked over step by step. No matter how crazy Sword God was, the sword chi and pillars of sword laws raged and swept out, and there were even several sword arts that covered the sky and shone in the sky. They were all blocked and minced by the chaotic divine light when they came within 10 meters of Jiang Tian. They couldn't harm Jiang Tian's body at all. In the end, Jiang Tian stomped his foot lightly. See calming divine law. In an instant, countless sword lights, sword chi, sword laws, and grand Daos within a radius of 50 kilometers turned into dead objects and floated motionlessly in the air. Even the sword god himself was completely frozen in place, and he was like a mosquito that was trapped in amber. That was the power of the space divine law. It actually froze the space, not the essence chi. It seemed to be a forbidden realm of the nascent soul level, but it was actually a supreme realm. The realms of normal soul formation cultivators were far inferior compared to Jiang Tian's sea calming divine law. At this moment, everyone was extremely shocked. Even the group of bandits were dumbfounded. They had never thought that Jiang Tian's ability to control space would be so terrifying. Even the sword god and his supreme sword Tao were frozen in place. Then, they saw Jiang Tian easily tear apart space and walk to 10 miles away from Sword God. Under Sword God's pleading, terrified, desperate, and unwilling gaze, Jiang Tian's face was calm, and he mercilessly pointed his finger. That finger seemed to have gone beyond time and space, as if it had been enlightened by a Buddha or a deity. As soon as it was raised, it crossed 10 miles and landed on Sword God's forehead. Arg! Sword God's eyes were filled with endless despair and unwillingness. He was a rogue cultivator who had worked hard for hundreds of years in the Beidou planet region. After going through all kinds of hardships and struggles, he was finally able to become a disciple of the Saint-era sword sect. He had finally reached the soul formation level after 1,000 years of hard work, but he was defeated when he fought with the Zongzi of the Saint-era sword sect for the position of sect master. He was hunted down and had to use a Dharma artifact to freeze his blood and life to escape into the universe. He woke up from despair again and again, only to see the desolate universe. He encountered dimensional dust and star storms again and again. He only managed to enter the ruins of deity after many difficulties. Now, how could he be willing to die and his Dao vanish? He was respected by thousands of people in the ruins of deity and was praised by the world. He was known as the ancestral patriarch and was an unparalleled giant. He even had the capital to return to the Beta planet system one day and take revenge. But on that day, because he met a cultivator from Earth, which was as insignificant as dust, his life's efforts and all his returns were in vain. I can't accept this. The sword god shouted in his heart. The god in the divine treasure also opened his mouth and roared. However, his voice was extremely muffled and weak, and his body could not even move a finger. He felt a sharp pain. The divine treasure collapsed and the god was annihilated. His immortal will drifted away and gradually fell into the void and darkness. At the last moment, there was only one voice in the sword god's heart. I can't accept this. The surroundings were completely silent and devoid of sound. From the outside, Jiang Tian's finger was like an immortal pointing the way or a Buddha picking up a flower. It did not have the slightest bit of worldly aura. However, the sword god's entire body, divine treasures, divine body, and divine soul all exploded, turning into balls of energy that were extremely dense and pure, and they were all absorbed by Jiang Tian's Taodai returning to the origin. Then the world was empty and only the moonlight was left. It was as if the sword god had never existed in this world. Unrivaled in the world, condensing space and killing the sword god with one finger. At that moment, countless people were shocked. There was dead silence in the sky and on the ground. The vast ruins of deity were silent. Billions of people were terrified. Chapter 1628. The sword god of the ruins Emperor's Palace, who had suppressed the ruins of immortality for thousands of years and was known as the greatest reliance of the ruins of immortality dynasty, had died. All the spectators felt as if they were in a dream and couldn't believe it. The outcome before their eyes was something they had never expected. The sword god of the ruins Emperor's Palace was the most powerful overlord from the Big Dipper galaxy. His cultivation was far beyond the ruins of immortality, and he was a super-grade soul formation cultivator. His strength was not far from the half-step void return realm, and he had a real sacred weapon. As for Jiang Tian, a nascent soul cultivator from a remote planet, he had fought against the Inferno Divine Emperor, the Headmaster, and the Sect Masters of many Grotto Heavens. He had even used the Absolute Heaven Sword, which was said to be an immortal artifact. He had expended too much energy and was completely exhausted. However, even under this kind of situation, Jiang Tian still shattered it with a finger, and his body and Dao disappeared. Didn't that mean that Jiang Tian's combat strength was far beyond the late-stage soul formation realm? Void return? Or even above? At this moment, this crazy thought appeared in many people's minds, and they were shocked by their own thoughts. Void return cultivators were called saints in ancient times. They were existences who had transcended mortality and attained immortality. They could look down on a galaxy and be famous throughout the ages. There had never been a void return cultivator in the ruins of immortality for 10,000 years. It was said that there were only a few void return cultivators in the Big Dipper galaxy. As for those above the void return realm, there didn't seem to be such a powerful existence at all. Is the ruins of immortality really going to be defeated? In the academy, Yanhua, Xianhu, and many other chancellors looked sad and desperate. The headmaster of the academy, the sword god of the ruins Emperor's Palace. They were the two biggest trump cards of the dynasty. Even the two of them had died in a day. Who among them could go against Kong Teichu? At this moment, there were a dozen soul formation grand chancellors in the academy, but they were all pale and trembling in fear. They didn't dare to provoke Jiang Tian at all. Why didn't the Sky Palace and the Sky River Lord do anything? Jade Lotus Fairy was unwilling to give up and said angrily, even though Star Lord Heavenly River is an experienced soul formation cultivator and one of the three most powerful giants, he's better at observing and exploring the universe. He's also better at making and controlling space battleships. In a one-on-one fight, he is definitely not Kong Teichu's match. A wise man shook his head and sighed, his eyes filled with despair. Upon hearing this, many people around were filled with grief and indignation. However, they had no choice but to accept this reality. Could it be that we, the noble creatures of the ruins of immortality, have to bow our heads to someone from a remote planet? Many people shed tears of unwillingness and humiliation, murmuring tearfully. Of course he wasn't willing to accept it. Every blade of grass, every tree, this academy, these beautiful mountains and rivers, these vast ruins of immortality, these twinkling stars of the southern gate 2 stars, how beautiful and magnificent was it? How could it fall into the hands of Jiang Tian? They had occupied this world for too long and were used to it. In their eyes, the ruins of immortality had always been their hometown. Every mountain, stone, blade of grass, and tree there belonged to them. Jiang Tian was an invader, a lowly one. They looked at Earth, which was in the age of doom, like the rich people living in big cities looking at the poor and backward countryside. They were full of superiority, disdain, and contempt. But then a country bumpkin had occupied their villa. They couldn't stand it anymore. Jiang Tian's battle in the Xiantian mountain range was broadcasted live, and the entire ruins of immortality could be seen. All the cities, sects, and even some chambers of commerce pulled out giant light screens for people to watch. Most mortals and cultivators in the ruins of immortality could see it through the Dharma artifacts and the communication Dharma artifacts. Therefore, when the sword god was killed by Jiang Tian with the primal chaos god-shattering finger, Jiang Tian's name could be said to have spread throughout the entire southern gate 2 stars. At that moment, even the women, the sick, the weak, and the old men in their 70s and 80s heard the name Kong Techu. Oh my god, I've heard that sword god of the ruins Emperor's Palace is the top immortal spirit of the ruins of immortality and a fallen deity. He stood at the top of the ruins of immortality in the generation of my grandfather's grandfather, but he was killed by a kid. This is going to turn the world upside down. An old man who was smoking a pipe and blowing out smoke rings exclaimed in amazement. What kid? That's the top fiend of the ruins of immortality, Kong Techu, a famous bandit. Be careful not to let his henchmen hear you and cut off your tongue. A brawny man next to him grunted. There are hundreds of thousands of cultivators in the ruins of immortality, and all of them are deities with powerful Dharma power. I don't believe that the ruins of immortality will change one day and the Jiang family will still be in charge. The old man smoking the pipe was a bit unconvinced. Although he was only a mortal, he was also a descendant of the wood spirit planet. He enjoyed endless spirit chi in the ruins of immortality, and his lifespan could reach 200 years. However, Kong Techu claimed that the ruins of immortality originally belonged to the natives of the deity land who lived in the second level and 3 worlds. He wanted to take it back and establish a new heavenly court to replace the ruins of immortality dynasty. Do you think that's what a normal person would say? Those mortal cultivators in the lower worlds are just ants and caterpillars. That's hard to say. Kong Techu can even kill Sword God. Maybe the world will really change. When that happens, he'll be the new emperor. Anyway, don't spread what you said. It's not good if others hear it. The brawny man said with a worried look. The old man was startled when he heard that. He looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that there were no cultivators passing by. He didn't dare to comment on Jiang Tian anymore. Meanwhile, Jiang Tian was famous in the ruins of immortality. Previously, his name was only known by the immortal cultivators in the imperial court of the ruins of immortality, the grotto heavens, and the various sects and clans. At this moment, even the children in the most remote towns of the ruins of immortality knew that Kong Techu was the strongest and most terrifying cultivator in the ruins of immortality. The power of one person is so terrifying. In one day and one night, he killed Divine Emperor Lai Hua, suppressed the elders of the grotto heavens, killed the master of the academy, and crushed Sword God with a finger. I'm afraid that the old ruins emperor was just like that. Could it be that the beautiful mountains of the ruins of immortality are really going to change owners? The cultivators of the ruins of immortality were already trembling in fear. In the academy, Jade Lotus Fairy's long hair fluttered in the wind. Her figure was slim and graceful, and her limpid eyes were filled with deep shock. She stared at Jiang Tian on the light screen, as if it was the first time she had met Jiang Tian. It was too terrifying. The power Jiang Tian showed at this time was far beyond the imagination of the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. He killed many early-stage and mid-stage soul formation grand cultivators with the power of an early-stage nascent soul cultivator. In the end, even the two soul formation cultivators, the master of the academy and sword god, were killed. That was simply beyond everyone's imagination. Only the heroes of the great Ko dynasty understood a little. The vastness of the universe was far beyond what they had seen and known. The solar system, the Southgate galaxy, the Big Dipper and the Milky Way were just a drop in the ocean compared to the vast universe. And the universe they lived in was like the bottom of a muddy well compared to the deity realm and the eternal divine realm. The laws Jiang Tian controlled were applicable in the entire universe and were the supreme laws in the mortal, deity and divine realms. They were brilliant and looked down on the world. The laws controlled by Sword God could barely be considered as star sector level laws, but they weren't even considered sacred laws or deity laws. Compared to Jiang Tian's God law, it was like the difference between clouds and mud, like a heavenly moat, the difference just too great. It was like a straw rope meeting a special carbon steel wire. It couldn't withstand a single blow. Long Shengnan, on the other hand, was so excited that she jumped up. Her face was filled with joy. They were protected by the chaotic energy of the Source Stone Cauldron, as if they were in another world. Otherwise, she, an early-stage nascent soul cultivator, and by Muxue, who was only a golden core cultivator, would have been crushed to pieces in a second. The artifact-making methods in the ruins of immortality were based on the foundation left by the wood spirit planet, so they were very powerful. There were universe arrays between the ruins of immortality and the second-level worlds. So, this battle not only affected the ruins of immortality, but also many second-level and third-level worlds. The fertile earth world. Wu Shujian, who used to be handsome and otherworldly like an immortal, was covered in dust and blood. Many of his Dharma treasures had dimmed and cracked. He and Fairy Yao Yu were running away on their flying swords. Behind them, dozens of nascent soul cultivators were chasing them. They flashed across the sky like supersonic fighter jets. All kinds of long-range Dharma treasures were activated. Ice, flames, black auras and poisonous substances were intertwined and attacked the two of them. There were many of them and none of them were weak. After a while, Wu Shujian and Fairy Yao Yu were still surrounded on a mountain. The leader of the pursuers was a peak-stage nascent soul cultivator. He came on his sword and shouted, "Wu Shujian, Yao Yu, the two of you have abandoned yourselves, associating with the traitor Jiang Taichu, deceiving the masses with lies, spreading rumors. You've betrayed the empire of the ruins of immortality and failed the 100 Moon Academy. You deserve to die for your crimes." Chapter 1629. This late-stage nascent soul cultivator was Gao Mingjing, the leader of a family in the fertile earth world. He had been close to Wu Shujian's family for generations. After Wu Shujian submitted to Jiang Tian, he returned to the fertile earth world and persuaded the major sects and aristocratic families to follow Jiang Tian's lead. The cultivators of this world gradually sided with Jiang Tian and formed an alliance. Gao Mingjing was one of them. But the news was leaked in the end. Before the battle with Jiang Tian in the Steel Forest in the Penglai world, Tong Yujin passed by the fertile earth world and killed several half-step soul formation cultivators who supported Jiang Tian. The alliance that supported Jiang Tian immediately collapsed and they surrendered to the ruins of deity. In the end, only Wu Shujian and a few others were left. "Then kill me." Wu Shujian held Yao Yu's hand and looked at Yao Yu. He said softly, "Don't worry. It's true that seeing the absolute beginning will ruin one's life. We thought we would be on the top of the war god roll and be recognized by the ruins emperor's palace. We would be able to become city lords, divine generals, or even ministers in the ruins of deity. Our families, relatives, and old friends would be proud of us. We would also be able to marry and have many children and live a peaceful and happy life. But I didn't expect it to be like this. Yeah. I wanted to be an official, but I didn't expect to become a bandit and ruin my family. Even though Fairy Yao Yu was covered in dust, she still gave off a peaceful and elegant feeling. This was just a joke and self-deprecation before death. Do you regret it? Wu Shujian asked. I feel very happy to die with Brother Shujian. Fairy Yao Yu leaned on Wu Shujian's chest and smiled. Wu Shujian's face was full of love and tenderness. He gently stroked her hair and sighed, I don't regret it. I just regret that I didn't live to see the day when Senior Tai Chu revives the ruins of deity. Silly girl. Gao Mingjing's face showed a hint of sympathy. He sighed and said, Shujian, stop dreaming. In the cultivation world, there was no such thing as justice. Everything was decided by strength. I heard that Kong Teichu appeared in the ruins of immortality, and the Inferno Divine Emperor led an army to besiege him. Do you think he can survive? Surrender. A trace of sorrow appeared on Wu Shujian's face. He was too lazy to say anything. He closed his eyes and calmly said, I would rather die than surrender. Stubborn. Kong Teichu is nothing but an ant trying to shake a tree. You're still loyal to him. You're even more foolish and unreasonable. Do we not know the truth of history? But is this useful? Strength was the most important thing. No matter how strong he was, could he withstand the divine Emperor Lai Hua's ancient chariot and the myriad Tao cauldron? No matter how talented he was, could he be compared to the sword god who had condensed a supreme golden core at the age of 100? His schemes are as vast as the sea. Can he defeat the headmaster who stands at the top of all Daoists? He's just trying to be a hero. He knew that he was going to die, so he exposed his location and asked the Inferno Divine Emperor to kill him. After all, dying at the hands of a divine emperor would look better. Many cultivators either sneered or shouted in a dignified manner. Wu Shujian had only wanted to die quickly, but when he heard those words, he couldn't help but be enraged. He opened his eyes and 2 rays of light shot out. He pulled out his sword and said coldly, You can kill me, humiliate me, and torture me. But you're a bunch of cowards and ants. You have no right to criticize Kong Teichu. Fight. Yao Yu Fairy also shouted coldly and stepped forward. Her battle intent was rising. You still want to fight with us? Gao Mingjing was flustered and exasperated. He shouted coldly, You really are a blockhead. Wu Shujian, since the 2 of you don't know what's good for you, then don't blame me for being merciless. Just as he was about to give the order, the communication Dharma artifact on his waist suddenly flashed. He picked up the Dharma artifact and was shocked. His face turned pale. How is this possible? Almost at the same time, the other cultivators also received messages from their families and sections. Their faces turned pale as if they had lost their parents. Gao Mingjing thought quickly and took a deep breath. The killing intent, arrogance, and viciousness on his face disappeared and were replaced by a deep flattery. He knelt in the air and begged, Shujian, I was wrong. I'm willing to give up the darkness and join the light. I'll follow His Majesty to fight against the dynasty of the ruins of immortality. We're willing to serve fellow cultivator Shujian as the realm lord of the fertile earth world. We'll form an army and conquer the ruins of immortality. We're willing to follow His Majesty, Tai Chu. We're loyal to him and will do anything for him. The other cultivators also immediately knelt before Wu Shujian. They wanted to cut off one of their arms to show their loyalty. Their attitude had completely changed, because they had all received a piece of news. Kong Teichu killed Divine Emperor Lai Hua, the sect masters of the 6 grotto heavens and the master of the academy in one day on the Xiantian mountain range. In the end, he even used the chaotic god-shattering finger to kill Sword God. Most cultivators were cold and rational. They were very utilitarian and practical. They had submitted to the ruins of immortality and chased after Wu Shujian because they thought that Jiang Tian would definitely die under the siege of the cultivators of the ruins of immortality and couldn't kill them. But now, it was completely different. Whether Jiang Tian had the strength to conquer the ruins of immortality and become the emperor or not, At least Jiang Tian could wipe out the fertile earth world with a slash of his sword. The empire of the ruins of immortality was already too busy to fend for itself. It no longer had the strength or means to protect them. One had to know that Wu Shujian was Jiang Taichu's spokesperson here. If they killed Wu Shujian, Kong Taichu wouldn't show mercy. Wu Shujian and Fairy Yao Yu were stunned when they saw Gao Mingjing and the others, who had been chasing them for months, kneeling on the ground like slaves. They couldn't believe what they were seeing, as if they were in a dream. Wu Shujian was the first to react. He waved his sleeves and stood with his hands behind his back. He asked, "What news did you get?" "Realm Lord, we've received news from the upper worlds." Gao Mingjing didn't dare to hide anything. With a flattering smile on his face, he quickly told her everything. "Brother Shujian, we didn't follow the wrong person. He did it. He really did it." Yao Yu was so excited that tears streamed down her face. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to hold back her sobs. At this moment, many cultivators looked at Wu Shujian and couldn't calm down. A day ago, Wu Shujian was still the public enemy of the fertile earth world. He was surrounded by thousands of cultivators and was as frightened as a stray dog. A day later, the nascent soul heavenly lords made him the lord of a realm, a figure who stood on top of this planet. He had unparalleled power and billions of people bowed to him. The other cultivators who were much more powerful than him could only kneel on the ground, like subjects facing their king. And all of this was brought about by Jiang Tian. When a man achieves the Tao, even his chickens and dogs will follow. Wu Shujian was startled for a while and then became excited. The lord of a realm was the highest position in the fertile earth world. His words carried weight, and he was even more powerful than the emperor of the human world. He had so much power that the entire world would tremble when he stomped his feet. The cultivation resources he controlled were as vast as the ocean, and his words were like the laws of heaven. He could mobilize the power of 100 nascent soul cultivators and thousands of golden core cultivators. Since Uncle Gao has realized it, I won't make things difficult for you. Wu Shujian sorted out the chaotic emotions in his heart and became calm and composed. He looked around at the crowd and shouted in a dignified manner, "But how His Majesty Tai Chu deals with you depends on your performance. Come with me, open the teleport array and go to the ruins of deity to support His Majesty Tai Chu." He was only angry that the ruins of deity had taken over and killed many saints of the ancient heavenly courts. He had never thought that Jiang Tian would win so quickly and thoroughly, and he would also benefit greatly. But since things had already come to this, there was no reason to give up halfway. He should go one step further. If he really overturned the ruins of deity and established a new heavenly courts, he would be a hero in the future, just like the master of the academy and the sword god. He could totally be called a Dao ancestor. At the same time, in the Dragon Gate world, fire and smoke rose into the sky. Islands were broken and the ocean was boiling. The world was dyed red with blood and bodies were floating on the ocean. An iron defense line, countless ancient warships modeled with copper rust, floating cloud towers, and flying shuttles formed an iron-blood defense line that divided the entire ocean world into two parts. Ao Feng, Mingyi, Ao Jiao, Qi Jui, Qi Liqui, Bai Zhe, Zhang Qianlei, Sword Master Ao Tian and Zhang Qinyang were all guarding the fortress and the line of defense, fighting in a bloody battle. A few months ago, hundreds of thousands of troops from the ruins of deity arrived from planet Hailan on a Dharma artifact. They broke the dimensional barrier with large Dharma artifacts and went straight in. There were only a few nascent soul cultivators in the Dragon Gate world, and their Dharma artifacts and array formations were very backward, so they were no match for the cultivators of the ruins of deity. Ao Feng and the other cultivators were defeated. After that, the cultivators of the Baiming Sea, Ingzhou and Penglai planets arrived and formed an alliance army to resist. Even so, they suffered heavy losses and the battle was extremely fierce. Tens of thousands of cultivators died and only 1/5 of the Dragon Gate world remained unoccupied. The alliance army of the four worlds wasn't in a good state. Many people's bodies were broken and their power was reduced by 1 or 2 levels. All kinds of Dharma treasures and battleships were broken and full of marks. There were holes left by arrows and there wasn't much Dharma power left. Moreover, there were less than 10,000 of them left. There were only 2 or 3 of them. On the other side, there were tens of thousands of people in the army of the ruins of deity. Their armor completely covered their faces, only revealing their cold eyes full of killing intent. The Dharma power of the weapons in their hands fluctuated strongly and let out rays of light, which was extremely terrifying. Their power was also extremely high. There were countless golden core cultivators, hundreds of nascent soul cultivators, and even 3 soul formation cultivators. The buildings, flying ships and battleships they were on were engraved with many complicated patterns. They were extremely expensive and extremely sturdy. There were all kinds of large Dharma artifacts on them, which were extremely powerful. If all of them were activated, it would only take half an hour to destroy the line of defense. There were many such battleships, which were densely packed and covered the sky. At this time, a soul formation grand cultivator wearing a silver python armor stepped forward, looking down at Ao Feng and the others as if they were ants. He said with a cold voice, "Don't be so arrogant." He said coldly, "The war has been going on for months. I admire you for being able to hold on until now. However, it's time for everything to end. As long as I give the order, this so-called line of defense is nothing more than a mud wall. It will be destroyed in a matter of seconds." Chapter 1630. That soul formation grand cultivator was a member of the royal family of the ruins of deity. Even though he hadn't become the emperor, he used to be a prince and was extremely talented. Later on, he was given the title of Lord and was known as Lord Jade Lion. He guarded a state and suppressed billions of people. He put one hand on his waist and puffed out his chest. His eyes were filled with arrogance and coldness. He snickered and said, "But if you recognize your sins and are willing to kneel outside the emperor's palace for 10 years and curse Kong Techu for being greedy and draw a clear line with him, I'll be lenient. This king will be lenient and give you a way out, allowing you to become the lowest class of slaves in the ruins of immortality." Ao Feng stepped forward and said coldly, "We're here to guard the territory of the new heavenly courts and fight for His Majesty Tai Chu. We'd rather die than take a step back. Fight. We'd rather die than take a step back. Fight. We'd rather die than be slaves." Ao Jiao, Princess Li Qi, Ao Tian and all the other cultivators of the new heavenly courts stepped forward at the same time. Their eyes were burning with an unyielding fighting spirit. Even though they were severely injured and covered in blood, their fighting spirit was still strong. However, his battle intent was vigorous and vigorous. Hot blood surged in his chest and surged into the sky. It was extremely frightening. They had completely disregarded their lives. You've got guts. I admire you very much. I'll fulfill your wish." Lord Jade Lion was enraged when he saw that. He kept laughing. When he was about to wave his hand and give the order to attack, suddenly, one of his subordinates hurriedly walked over and whispered something into his ear with his divine sense. Lord Jade Lion's face changed after hearing that. He was shocked and in disbelief. His legs gave out and he almost fell to the ground. The next second, he said loudly, "All soldiers, return to the ruins of deity. Everyone, full speed. Rumble." Space battleships with powerful auras soared into the sky like mountains, flying toward the outer space. They didn't attack the coalition army anymore, as if it wasn't worth wasting their time. What's going on? Why aren't they fighting? In the blink of an eye, all the battleships of the ruins of immortality had left the realm, leaving everyone standing there in disbelief. At this moment, a cultivator arrived on his sword and said happily, "Seniors, I just received a message. His Majesty, Grand Primordium, killed Divine Emperor Lai Hua, suppressed the 6 grotto heavens, killed Master Fu, and killed Sword God with one finger. Great victory! Great victory! Great victory!" He shouted out, "Great victory," 3 times in a row. He was so excited that tears streamed down his face and his whole body was trembling. This is the ruins of immortality. All expeditionary forces are to retreat from the lower realm to the ruins of immortality. At that moment, the entire Dragon Gate world was in an uproar. Countless descendants of the natives of the deity land cried. Be it mortals, cultivators, or even demonic beasts, they all raised their heads to the sky and sang, beating their chests. Ever since the Ruins Emperor Palace issued the order for Marquis Jade Lion to lead an army of hundreds of thousands of cultivators to invade, the entire Dragon Gate world had undergone a tumultuous change. All the cultivators and demonic beasts above the Foundation establishment level had died in battle. Only a few hundred people were left. Large areas of territory had been occupied and hundreds of millions of creatures had been imprisoned and turned into slaves. They had been tortured and even killed for no reason. In a short time, hundreds of millions of people had been killed or injured. They knew that Zhang Tian was still fighting in the ruins of immortality. But they didn't have much hope. After all, Zhang Tian was still too far away from the peak soul formation cultivators like Master Fu and Sword God. Maybe if Zhang Tian had a few decades or even a century, he would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with Master Fu and Sword God and overthrow the empire of the ruins of immortality. But by then, everyone would have been reduced to a pile of dirt. Of course, Ao Feng and the others were also open-minded. It could be said that the day they followed Zhang Tian, they were already prepared to die on the battlefield. No matter how great the battle was, there would always be sacrifices. That was why they were so shocked and excited when they heard that Zhang Tian had killed Divine Emperor Lai Hua, Master Fu, and Sword God. Let's take a short break. The time for the real final battle is coming. Maybe we'll have to go to the ruins of immortality and help Master. Ao Feng said excitedly. Hearing that, everyone looked up at the bright stars of the ruins of immortality in the sky. Their eyes were shining and their fighting spirit was boiling. They knew that the final battle was coming. If we take down the ruins of immortality, we can use the ruins of immortality as a springboard to truly step into the central galaxy and conquer the Sea of Stars. Bai Zhe rubbed his hands excitedly. Star-Lord, what should we do? In the ruins Emperor's Palace, the handsome Prince Xiahe, who was surrounded by glittering stars, looked at Star-Lord Tianhe with fear. Are you afraid of death? Star-Lord Tianhe had white hair and looked elegant. His face was calm and his eyes were as bright as stars. It seemed that the deaths of Master Fu and Sword God didn't affect him much. He put his hands behind his back and looked at the deep night sky and the stars. His eyes were deep and kind, containing wisdom and wisdom. Yes. Since he was a child, Prince Xiahe had been studying the stars in the sky and the orbits of the stars. He was pragmatic, rational, and honest. Therefore, he answered truthfully. Yes, even ants want to live, not to mention humans, who are the spirits of all things. Star-Lord Tianhe smiled kindly. Even if we know that the third star of the South Gate is about to explode, the entire ruins of immortality will turn into nothingness, and billions of creatures will turn into ashes, we don't have much time left. But you and I still want to live. Hearing that, Prince Xiahe's handsome face showed a hint of self-mockery. As the prince in charge of Sky Palace, he knew the situation of the 3 stars of the South Gate better than the average person. On the Xintian mountain range, Master Fu had said those words to confuse and dispel Zhang Tian's killing intent and hostility, but about the destruction of Wood Spirit Planet and the eruption of the 3rd star of the South Gate, it was absolutely true. But since we detected that the 3rd star of the South Gate was about to explode, for thousands of years, we no longer cared about personal life and death, but about the survival of our civilization. Star-Lord Tianhe withdrew his gaze from the deep night sky and looked at Prince Xiahe solemnly. If we ask you to die to protect the roots of the descendants of Wood Spirit Planet, what would you do? Are you willing? I am willing, Prince Xiahe answered. His eyes suddenly became sharp, and his face was firm without a trace of hesitation. Good. Very good. The Heavenly River Star Lord nodded in approval. He revealed a relieved expression and said, That's right. In the year 8900 of the ruins of Immortality calendar, we began to push toward the Stellar Sky sector along the Hylon and Dragon Gate worlds. The stellar sky sector is located in the solar system, not far from the Earth sector. There is a teleportation array in the world hole. But Ao Feng's people in the Dragon Gate world pretended to be polite and hid the location of the ancient teleportation array. Even though we captured many people from the true Dragon Dynasty, they didn't hesitate to detonate their divine souls so that we couldn't find the ancient teleportation array. In fact, we thought of this a long time ago. We don't even know if the teleportation array to the solar system still exists. After all, those teleportation arrays were built by the ancient heavenly court of the previous dynasty. Too many years have passed and the flames of war have eroded them. No one can be sure. Besides, we've also suffered from the teleportation arrays of the world hole. The ancient heavenly court of the previous dynasty was very skilled in refining artifacts. Many teleportation arrays of the world hole have the function of checking bloodlines. The South Gate star system's cultivators will be recognized by the array formation and torn to pieces by the spatial power of the array formation in seconds. So, 1,000 years ago, we prepared several space fleets and gathered 30,000 cultivators, 2,000 boys and girls, and tens of thousands of bloodlines and divine soul seeds. There were even soul formation overlords among them. They didn't use the teleportation arrays of the world hole, but used the most primitive way to travel 4 light years and hundreds of years to conquer Earth. Just a few days ago, Sky Palace received a signal from the space array. This expedition army had arrived in the solar system and sent a signal immediately. This signal crossed 4 light years. Even if it was at sublight speed, they had already been in the solar system for several years. They must have conquered the entire solar system by now. Master, is this true? Hearing this, Prince Xiahe trembled with excitement. He couldn't control himself. Tears rolled down his cheeks and he choked. This meant that even if the ruins of immortality and the South Gate 2 stars were burned to ashes by the 3rd star, the Wood Spirit planet and the ruins Emperor's bloodline would not be cut off. Chapter 1631. It's true. The heavenly river star lord nodded slowly and smiled as if he had been relieved of a heavy burden. Kong Teichu is very powerful. Both the headmaster and the sword god know that. If we offend him, the chances of us dying are very high. On the surface, it seems that we can negotiate. After all, Kong Teichu seems to be able to help us solve the crisis. Dignity is nothing compared to the survival of civilization. It's worthless. What's wrong with being a slave? But why did the headmaster and the sword god swear to kill Kong Teichu? It's simple. If I'm not mistaken, the human race on Earth, we prefer to call it Middle Saturn, has already been wiped out by the expedition army of the ruins of immortality. He revealed a contented smile and sighed, I'm sorry. Kong Teichu's sect is said to be the top sect in the solar system. It's the vanguard against the expedition army of the ruins of immortality. I'm afraid it's already extinct. Kong Teichu is a vengeful and narrow-minded person. If others offend him, he'll pay them back 10,000 times. If he knows the news, he'll take revenge and kill. It's not a big deal to wipe out the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. We'll die sooner or later. I'm just afraid that Kong Teichu will go back to the solar system and kill our descendants. Master, I understand. Prince Xiahe straightened his body. In an instant, a strong fighting spirit shot to the sky and he said passionately, as long as we kill Kong Teichu here, we'll die together. The seedlings of our Wood Spirit star civilization have been planted on Earth. One day, they will grow into towering trees, spreading their branches and leaves, and have endless descendants. The seeds of our civilization have been scattered in the solar system. They'll become a prairie fire and one day, they'll light up the entire dark universe. That's right. Tianhe Lord turned around and glanced at the nobles, masters of the guarding families, soul formation overlords, divine generals, and rogue cultivators. He said in a deep voice, you must have understood the key points. We understand. At that moment, the 100 soul formation grand cultivators, the nobles and ministers of the dynasties and the famous rogue cultivators in the world of cultivation, a total of 1,000 people, all shouted fervently, as if they were not afraid of death. If we submit to Kang Techu, he may realize that Earth has fallen and that his family has been killed in a few years. If they come for revenge, we will still have to die. Star Lord Tianhe's expression was very calm as he scanned the crowd. Even if we were lucky enough to escape from Kang Techu, we would not be able to escape from the South Gate Galaxy. No one could solve the problem of the South Gate third planet. In 100 years, or even just a few decades, or even a few years, the third Southern Gate star will still devour us, and we will still die. But if we can kill Kang Techu today, our sacrifice will be meaningful. He looked up at the sky and pointed at a star that was incomparably tiny and dim in the starry sky, compared to the brilliant and vast stars of Hylon, Fertile Land, Desert, Dragon Gate, Northern Sea, and so on. He waved his hands and said excitedly, "That's the sun. There's a planet with vitality next to it. That's Earth. And our children and grandchildren will multiply there. Our blood still flows in that place. Our civilization will continue and grow there." In the era of the tyrant emperors, the third star had an anomaly. The Wood Spirit Star was about to be destroyed, and Project Fireworks was activated. Our ancestors, billions of heroes, disappeared like fireworks in the deep space of the universe. They were extinguished like sparks and turned into cold ashes. 8,000 years after the establishment of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality, the third planet expanded again. We already know that the closest planet to us can continue our lives and civilization. We've already arrived and occupied the solar system. How can we give up? Today, we should follow our ancestors and kill Kang Techu without fear of death for the continuation of our civilization. Tears rolled down his cheeks. He was impassioned and his blood was boiling. He stretched out his hands and waved them fiercely in the air. If we kill Jiang Taichu today, all the predecessors and sages who sacrificed themselves in the fireworks plan during the Tyrant era, as well as us who sacrificed ourselves today, will be remembered and praised by our descendants. We will be praised on Saturn in the solar system 4 light-years away, and even in the entire Milky Way one day. Although we're dead today, our spirits will live on forever. Our names will shine brightly in the cold and dark universe. Forever and ever. Fight for the continuation of our civilization. Prince Xia put on a suit of armor that shone with golden light, looking mighty and extraordinary. He held a long halberd in his hand and raised his arm as he shouted, "Fight for the continuation of our civilization." In an instant, hundreds of people in the hall, all of whom were at the top of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality, shouted at the same time. Everyone's eyes were filled with crazy killing intent and fearless fighting spirit. 800,000 cultivators, move out. We'll torture Kang Techu to death even if we have to. Star Lord Tianhe straightened his body and his gentleness disappeared. His eyes were full of killing intent and a powerful energy spread out, as if he were one of the 3 leaders of the Ruins of Immortality. He said coldly, "I'd like to see if Kang Techu is the son of a deity or just a mortal body." In the Xiantian mountain range, mountains had collapsed and there were huge gullies on the ground. Countless broken limbs were piled up. It was a mess and blood stained the ground. Smoke rose everywhere and covered the sky. Our master was killed by that kid. Many sword servants were heartbroken and tears fell like rain, but they didn't dare to go forward. Not only them, but hundreds of thousands of cultivators outside the Xiantian mountain range were also trembling and didn't dare to get close. Even though they were 1,000 miles away from Jiangtian, their hearts still palpitated and they felt oppressed. It was as if they weren't facing a mortal, but a celestial being, a Buddha, a saint god, a peerless demon, and they could only watch as Jiangtian led the bandits away. This time, the base of the Great Ko dynasty in the fallen deity Sea territory sent a 100-mile flying ship to pick up Jiangtian and the others. The assassins of the Great Ko dynasty didn't hide their energy at all and went all the way to a stronghold of the Great Ko dynasty. Along the way, all the cultivators of the Ruins of Immortality, no matter how high their status or how powerful they were, didn't dare to show up. Not to mention stopping Jiangtian. Even the giant cities that were heavily guarded by Soul Formation realm warriors and the families that guarded the city closed their gates and activated their protective arrays. They were afraid that Jiang Tianxing would go there and start a massacre. Jiang Tian had killed Chancellor Kumu, Divine Emperor Hanshi and Sword Servant Tong Yujin to provoke the Ruins Emperor's Palace and the Academy. Now, Jiang Tian had killed the Master and the Sword God, which meant that he was stepping on the entire ruins of immortality. No force would dare to provoke him easily. But on the other hand, Jiang Tian's move was equivalent to completely cutting off the last possibility of making peace with the ruins of immortality. The two sides were completely on opposite sides and wouldn't rest until one of them was dead. Kong Teichu's move is unwise. The Ruins Emperor's Palace has ruled the ruins of immortality for thousands of years. There were innumerable restrictions and grand formations everywhere. Besides, the divine emperors of the past are still sleeping and there are hundreds of soul formation cultivators guarding. No one knows how deep their foundation is and how powerful their methods are. He's very strong, but the people of the ruins of immortality are too weak. It's extremely unwise to become enemies with the ruins of immortality. An old cultivator who had experienced the vicissitudes of life commented. The rapid expansion and signs of the third star of the South Gate aren't false. Kong Teichu's top priority should be to establish a joint heavenly court with the ruins of immortality and unite the cultivators of our generation to solve the crisis brought by the third star together. A cultivator put on a far-sighted posture and nodded in agreement. Instead of intensifying the conflict and stirring up a bloody storm. What's the use of him occupying the ruins of immortality? Some cultivators of the ruins of immortality had already learned the truth about the third star of the South Gate in detail. They were drunk and exiled themselves as if they were facing the end of the world. If the crisis of the third star isn't solved, in the near future he and all the natives of the deity ground and us will be turned into ashes together. Everyone thought that Jiang Tian didn't look at the big picture this time. The Divine Emperor, the Master and the Sword God were extremely respected in the hearts of the cultivators of the ruins of immortality. They were the highest beliefs. Jiang Tian had killed them, which was a life and death feud that couldn't be reconciled. Although Kong Teichu's cultivation was very strong and he couldn't kill him, no matter what, he wouldn't submit to him. After all, he's young and impetuous. He doesn't know the meaning of conciliation. Someone shook their head and sighed. Everyone had their own opinions. But there was one thing that they all agreed on. They had to admit that Kong Teichu was already invincible. Even the old Ruins Emperor was only on par with him. As long as he didn't go to the headquarters of the Ruins Capital, the Ruins Capital had sent divine emperors, divine generals or a dozen soul formation cultivators from the guarding families, but they couldn't do anything to Jiang Tian. The future situation. It was highly possible that Jiang Tian would lead the assassins of the bandits to occupy some level 2 and level 3 worlds, as well as the strongholds of the bandits in the ruins of immortality such as the Sea of Fallen Deity to confront the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality. But of the two forces, the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality was obviously more powerful and had a deeper foundation. After all, nobody knew what kind of trump cards the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality had. At least, it could be seen that the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality had at least 3 trump cards that Jiang Tian was far inferior to. First, they had the remnants of the civilization on the Wood Spirit planet. Second, the Sword God of the Ruins Emperor's Palace came from the Beidou planet region, bringing with him a lot of advanced cultivation arts and resources. He even had connections with the Beidou planet region. Third, the ancestors of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality had already gone to the Central Galaxy and might have already settled down. Besides, if the old Ruins Emperor was still alive, or if there were some sacred weapons and divine arrays left behind on the Wood Spirit planet, who would be able to resist them? But half a day later, a piece of news was spread across the world. Send a message to the Emperor of the Ruins. Jiang Tian swore a blood oath on Sage Island in the Sea of Fallen Deity, in front of the tablets of the ancestors of the ancient heavenly courts and the tombstones of the bandits who had died in battle. I'll go to the Ruins capital in 7 days, Destroy the Emperor of the Ruins Palace, destroy their bloodline and kill everything. The news was spread. The entire Ruins of Immortality was in an uproar. Chapter 1632. One of the 8 guardian families of the Ruins of Immortality, the Yu family. The family head, Yu Xuanxiu, sneered and shook his head. Kong Teichu is too arrogant. He thinks he's invincible in the Ruins of Immortality just because he killed the teacher and the sword god. The Ruins Emperor's Palace, the Academy, and the Sky Palace haven't finished playing their trump cards. There are more than 100 soul formation cultivators. Plus, the old Ruins Emperor is still there. The Ruins capital, as well as the cities and sects of the Ruins of Immortality, have set up countless spell formations, secret treasures, and divine laws. He's courting death by going to the Ruins capital. Kong Teichu really doesn't know what's good for him. In the academy, Jade Lotus Fairy also sneered and mocked. Jiang Taichu is like a wandering spirit, illusory and illusory. He has the power of a soul formation cultivator and can hide his tracks. It's naturally difficult to kill him. But he's walking right into the trap and going against the Ruins capital. Only death awaits him. Beside her, several spell formation masters sneered. Kong Teichu probably doesn't know that the entire Ruins capital is a super killing formation. It can even kill return to void stage mighty figures. Otherwise, with the sword god's power, why would he be willing to serve the Ruins Emperor's palace and not replace it and become the emperor himself? Jiang Tian's proclamation actually made the assassins feel that it wasn't very reliable. Logically speaking, they should build a base and plan slowly, using 10 or even 20 years to destroy the Ruins of Immortality Empire. But they knew the rules. Now that the new heavenly court had been established, Jiang Tian's words carried weight. Jiang Tian would definitely consider their suggestions, so there was no need to say anything. However, the sect leader of the Jade Lady sect, by Mushue's master, rushed to the fallen Immortal Sea region to visit Jiang Tian and discuss this matter. This woman was a half-step soul formation cultivator and was called Fairy Ruelong. Although she was 1,000 years old, she looked like she was in her 30s. She had a beautiful face and an enchanting figure. When she stood next to Bai Mushue, they didn't look like master and disciple, but more like sisters. I've caused trouble for the sect in the past few months by conquering the Ruins of Immortality. Bai Mushue accompanied Jiang Tian to greet her master. With tears in her eyes, she knelt down. These words were not empty words. Bai Mushue had a lot of activities in Penglai back then. However, the Jade Lady sect was located in the Ruins of Immortality. After the news of Bai Mushue following Jiang Tian spread out, the Jade Lady sect was immediately massacred and annihilated. Thousands of disciples were killed or injured. Although the members of the Jade Lady school were all women, they understood the importance of justice and were not weak at all. They used the intelligence system that was spread all over the Ruins of Immortality to pass on information to the Great Bandits, helping them escape the pursuit of the Inferno Godly Emperor. Otherwise, Dako's group of heroes would probably not be able to hold on until Jiang Tian came out of seclusion and would be annihilated. Therefore, the group of heroes had a good impression of Fairy Ruelong. It's not your fault. My Jade Maiden sect is a descendant of the ancient heavenly court. Sooner or later, there will be a war between us and the Immortal Ruins Imperial Court. It was just that heroes created the situation. Fellow Daoist Grand Primordium's appearance only brought that day to an earlier date. Fairy Ruelong was dressed elegantly in a palace dress. Her expression was very kind, and her jade face was radiant. Her eyes were clear and bright, and the slight crow's feet made her more charming. She was graceful, and she was proficient in seduction techniques. She could make an emperor fall for her. In fact, the 7 bandits had once revealed to him that Fairy Ruelong was originally the concubine of a certain godly emperor. However, because she was a descendant of the deity ground and her bloodline was excluded, she was defeated in a palace struggle, and even her own son was killed. Therefore, she left the Ruins Emperor's palace and joined the Jade Lady sect as the next sect master. She was also doing it for revenge. That was actually the reason why the Jade Lady sect had been developing smoothly before. After all, she was an imperial concubine. Although she had hidden her identity, her influence was still there and she had many connections. Many important people in the ruins of immortality knew about that, so they turned a blind eye to the various activities of the Jade Lady sect. She walked in front of Jiang Tian and bowed. Her every move was elegant and appropriate. Her voice was a little hoarse, but it was full of magnetism and was very moving. "I'm Ruelong. Greetings, His Majesty Taichu. You may rise." Jiang Tian had his hands behind his back. His expression was calm as he accepted this bow. She was just a supreme being in the ruins of immortality. She was supreme in the eyes of others, but she was nothing in Jiang Tian's eyes. After all, he had once reached the top of the universe. Everything in front of him was not even a fraction of what he had achieved in his previous life, so he didn't care. "May I know why Sect Master Ruelong is looking for me?" Jiang Tian asked with a smile as he gestured for her to sit down and waited for Long Xingnan to serve tea. Jiang Tian gave Elder Ruelong the respect she deserved. After all, she had sacrificed a lot in the war and her sect was almost destroyed. Her disciple, Bai Muxue, was also his disciple. Elder Ruelong put down her teacup, and a solemn expression appeared on her face. She said softly, "I was injured a little while ago, and I was in seclusion to heal my injuries. I heard that His Majesty Taichu said that he would level the ruined city in 7 days, so I quickly came out and came to see you." "Oh? Is there a problem?" Jiang Tian took the spirit fruit from Long Xingnan and asked with a smile. Ruelong said seriously, "His Majesty Taichu, I know you're a divine dragon. Not only are you powerful, but you also have a broad vision and a domineering aura. However, the ruined city isn't as simple as you think. If you go, you'll be digging your own grave and you won't be able to come back." Fairy Ruelong thought she was being very polite. After all, she used to be the imperial concubine and knew a lot about the ruined city. As far as she was concerned, the formations, restrictions, the powerful warriors, and the old monsters sleeping on the wood spirit's ancestral mountain were enough to destroy even 1,000 divine transformation realm warriors. She was already being polite by not saying that Jiang Tian was like a moth flying into a flame or an egg hitting a rock. Jiang Tian knew she meant well, so he wasn't angry. He smiled and said, "Don't worry. Fairy Ruelong, I'm not a reckless person. I'll retreat if I see something wrong. There's a restriction there from the wood spirit planet, and it's from the era of the Overlord. It said that although the Overlord died, his obsession didn't die and he stayed near the South Gate 1 star. In the end, the old ruins emperor, the Heavenly River Star Lord and the others collected and cultivated this remnant soul as an array spirit to set up a super-killing array." Fairy Ruelong took a deep breath and sighed. Back then, the sages and emperors of the Ao Emperor's era all reached the void return level and were called saints. The overlords of the ancient heavenly court all died in this array. Do you think? She shook her head. What she meant was that even the sages of the ancient times could only die. So what if Kong Taichu was strong? What kind of waves could he stir up? Even the sages of the ancient times were killed by this terrifying array restriction. Could he escape? Jiang Tian laughed and said, "Elder Ruelong, I've always thought that there's nothing to be afraid of when the heavens change and the ancestors can't be controlled. The ancestors, the predecessors, and the sages should be respected, but one should not refer to their trajectory for every action and action. Let me say something very disrespectful. If they really had the ability, or rather, if they were strong enough, would they have lost lovely land 10,000 years ago? Would they have let the ruins of immortality fall into the hands of the descendants of the wood spirit planet? What they can't do, I can't do it." Ruelong was stunned by Jiang Tian's words. She couldn't believe it. She didn't expect Jiang Tian to be so arrogant that he didn't even care about the ancient heavenly court's overlords. After a moment, Ruelong looked a little regretful. She smiled bitterly and said, "Your Majesty Taichu, with your magnanimity, you should be able to listen to some honest advice. Then I'll be frank. You might have lost your mind in the joy of victory." You are indeed amazing and invincible in the ruins of immortality. But you should know that a person's power is limited. If the ruins of Immortality Empire was easy to deal with, how could it have been stable for 10,000 years? You should know that many of the native descendants of the immortal land resisted, but you saw the result. The ruins of Immortality Empire became stronger and stronger, and we were almost wiped out. Your Majesty Tai Chu, you should have learned your lesson last time. If you had kept a low profile and not acted rashly, you wouldn't have set off great waves in the ruins of immortality. Some time ago, the great co-heroes wouldn't have been surrounded and hunted down like stray dogs. If I may say something unpleasant, if you hadn't come out of seclusion in time, the great co-heroes would have been wiped out. Your Majesty, you were lucky once, but you won't always be blessed by the heavens. Such good luck. I've made up my mind. There's no need to talk about it. Jiang Tian shook his head speechlessly. Discussing military and political matters with this woman was like playing the lute to a cow. At that time, the ruins Emperor's Palace, Sky Palace, and the Academy had already worked together to break the gate of heaven influence. The great co-assassins had nowhere to hide, which was why they suffered such heavy losses. It wasn't that Jiang Tian's operation was wrong. In fact, even if the great co-assassins hid everywhere, they would still be hunted down and unable to escape. Why did you walk into the trap? Ruelong Fairy was anxious and had to say in a more serious tone, My friend Tai Chu, if you go to the ruins of immortality, you'll really be walking into a trap. I've already received news that the guardian families and cities have gathered in the ruins of immortality to set up several deep defense lines. Hundreds of thousands of cultivators want to fight you to the death. Chapter 1633. The Empire of the Ruins of Immortality was too powerful. Even if Jiang Tian had the strength of a Void Return cultivator, they might still be able to kill him. On the Shentian mountain range, the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality was still fighting normally. If they wanted to perish together with you, how could Kong Teichu withstand it? Facing Fairy Rui Long, who was already a little angry, Jiang Tian just smiled and said calmly, Senior Rui Long, don't worry. You're too narrow-minded. My ability is not something you can imagine. At this moment, Fairy Rui Long was extremely disappointed in Jiang Tian. Good words couldn't persuade a stubborn person. Although Kong Teichu was powerful and domineering, he wasn't a good general and didn't have the potential to be an emperor. He was using his own weakness to attack someone else's strength, but he was stubborn and couldn't listen to good words. Such a reckless person wanted to establish a new heavenly court. What a joke. Okay, then I'll take my leave. However, with her strength and status, she was naturally not qualified to challenge Jiang Tian. She sighed in her heart. Good words couldn't persuade a stubborn person, so she got up and said goodbye. Bai Muxue got up and sent her off. The two of them left the fallen deity Sea. Fairy Rilong stopped and said with a hint of worry on her face, Shui, you've trusted the wrong person this time. Kong Teichu is too arrogant. It's okay if he dies, but I'm afraid that he and the other heroes will be doomed eternally. Bai Muxue hesitated for a moment and said for Jiang Tian, Master, Senior Tai Chu is the reincarnation of a banished deity. Everything should be within his expectations. Fairy Rui Long leaped into the air on her sword. Her snow-white Daoist robe fluttered in the air like a blooming flower. Her sleeves flew up, revealing her snow-white arms. She looked noble and ethereal. She shook her head and chuckled. You've been fooled by him. We, the Jade Lady sect, are the best at sensing and judging the state of mind. Can I see it? He's in the boundless secular world. He's worried about his country, his parents, his wife, and his children. He's full of greed, anger, and stupidity. How can he be a deity? It's filthy and unbearably vulgar. Bai Muxue thought for a moment and said softly, Senior Tai Chu once told me that under the blue sky is the mortal world. Immortal cultivators are also humans, and even immortals are just higher-level humans. They also have emotions and desires. Moreover, Senior Tai Chu seemed to be unscrupulous and domineering, but in fact, he was proficient in mathematical deduction and had always been meticulous and watertight. He rarely misses. Who can make a flawless plan? Moreover, he was good at calculating, but he didn't calculate at all. Attacking the ruined capital is the same as walking right into a trap. Rui Longfairy was too lazy to argue with her. Her slender white hand gently combed her fluttering hair and said solemnly, "Mushua, we may be master and disciple in name, but I've always treated you as my daughter. Let me remind you that Kong Techu will definitely lose. You should have made plans in advance so that you don't get yourself killed when your army is defeated like a collapsing mountain." "I understand." Bai Mushue bowed but did not say anything else. "So, that's all I have to say. You're on your own. You've already followed Kong Techu to learn mathematics and Daoist spells. Find another master. After I'm reborn, I'll announce that I've severed our relationship as master and disciple." Rui Longfairy was disappointed in Jiang Tian. Seeing that Bai Mushue did not seem to listen to her advice, she could only shake her head and sigh. Then she turned into a ray of light and disappeared into the sky. "Master?" Bai Mushue looked at her master's disappearing figure with mixed feelings. With her proficiency in mathematics and her ability to predict 3 steps ahead, she could naturally guess that Rui Longfairy would announce that she had nothing to do with the new heavenly court and draw a clear line between them. She was not optimistic about Jiang Tian's operation this time. A gentleman would not stand under a collapsing wall. "But I believe that Senior Tai Chu will not let us down this time." She was letting her imagination run wild. Then she saw a few rays of light piercing through the sun and the moon, streaking across the sky with earth-shattering momentum as they flew toward the fallen Immortal Sea region. Could they be enemies? Bai Mushue was shocked. The fallen Immortal Sea region was now the base camp of the new heavenly court. Moreover, both sides were in a state of war. The place was heavily guarded, and no cultivators were allowed to enter or leave as they wished. Even the assassins of the big bandits had to register and verify their identity and bloodline. Bai Mushue naturally had this idea since these people were coming so aggressively. They came so quickly. Bai Mushue quickly took out her Dharma artifact and shouted, "The fallen Immortal Sea region is an important place of the new heavenly court. Anyone who comes must drop your Dharma artifact and be verified before you can set foot in." New heavenly court? That's nothing. The rays of light slowed down, but Bai Mushue could see that they were a few flying ships that could be called Dao artifacts. The leading flying ship was even more dazzling. There were dragons coiling around jade pillars, and phoenixes circling around the lintel. It was extremely luxurious. The flying ships were densely packed, and runes and Dao patterns were everywhere. They were very ancient and profound, and their Dharma powers were powerful and majestic. They could completely withstand the full-strength attacks of a soul formation cultivator several times. In terms of value, they could buy at least 3 to 5 huge cities. Those who could drive such flying ships were, of course, wealthy and respectable. An old but arrogant voice came from the luxurious flying ship. "Open your eyes and take a look. This is the real heavenly court." The heavenly court's assassin dynasty. Bai Mushue took a closer look and couldn't help but be shocked. She saw a bright yellow flag flying above the flying ship. There were 2 shining words embroidered on it, "Heavenly Court." The flying ship was extremely fast. In the time she was stunned, it had already rushed 3 miles away from her. All kinds of runes on the ship glowed, and a mighty wave of Dharma power swept over. This was the Dharma power of a rune array that was enough to break through to the soul formation realm. Bai Mushue was only a golden core cultivator, so how could she withstand it? She was blown away like a withered leaf in the wind. She felt so uncomfortable that she wanted to die. She opened her mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face was as pale as paper. She managed to grab the flying sword and stepped on it. She stood shakily in the air. Then, she heard the old and arrogant voice on the flying ship again. "My master, the leader of the heavenly court's assassin dynasty, the descendant of the Ao Emperor, Ao Chijue, is here to meet His Excellency Kong Techu." The group of flying ships was unstoppable. They rushed to the defense line as if there was no one there. They crushed a few fortresses and arrays and knocked a few cultivators away before they came to a stop. "Please inform your master." A tall and straight old man walked out. Judging from the voice, he was the one who spoke just now. He was wearing a plain black outfit and was dressed like a servant. His cultivation was only at the nascent soul level, but his aura was extremely arrogant and domineering. At this time, many bandits were alarmed. They stepped out with anger in their eyes. "Ao Chijue, why is he here?" Nyo Duotian narrowed his eyes and smoked a pipe. He seemed to be deep in thought. "We wanted to cooperate with the Heavenly Court's assassins before, but he refused. Now, our master can share the world with the Empire of the Immortal Ruins. I'm afraid this old man is here to take the fruit." Yun Zhongzi's expression was calm, but his eyes flickered with a hint of mockery. Then he signaled Fu Heishui with his eyes. Fu Heishui immediately understood and flew towards the depths of the sea. On an island, a silver waterfall fell, ancient trees towered into the sky, and vines as thick as an arm climbed up the red cliff. The orchids and crimson grass were crystal clear and emitted auspicious light. They swayed in the wind, and the environment was peaceful. This was a blessed land. Jiang Tian lived here, and the spirit qi was abundant. In fact, he had consumed a lot of energy in the battle at the mysterious Heaven Mountain range. Jiang Tian planned to go into seclusion to refine the sword god's blood and dermic powers. He should be able to break through to the third level of the nascent soul level and lay the foundation for attacking the immortal ruins. Fu Heishui flew over very slowly. He did not dare to disturb him. Jiang Tian was approachable and had fought side by side with them. They had a deep relationship, but they had to follow the rules. Jiang Tian was now the ruler of the new heavenly court, and his position was supreme. Jiang Tian lived in a courtyard. It wasn't extravagant, but it was very elegant. White walls and gray tiles, there were 9 winding corridors, pavilions, green ponds, green forests, drizzling rain, sparkling and translucent petals drifting down like rain, surrounded by mist. It was like a paradise on earth. Fu Heishui landed at the door. Just as he was about to send a message, he heard Jiang Tian's voice. "I already know the situation outside. Celestial Emperor, please tell me." Fu Heishui's expression was solemn. He bowed slightly and asked respectfully. He was originally a funny person, but he was not stupid. If Jiang Tian put down his arrogance and went on a tour with them, they could be like brothers in arms. However, when it came to matters of the country, it was official business. Of course, they had to pay attention to the hierarchy. They offended my disciple and barged into the pass. They did not follow the rules of the new heavenly court. They must pay the price. After Jiang Tian's instructions were transmitted over, the small courtyard recovered its calm, and there wasn't the slightest bit of sound any longer, causing it to reveal a quiet and mysterious atmosphere. Jiang Tian had already killed the headmaster, the sword god, and the Inferno Divine Emperor. He had suppressed the 6 grotto heavens and taken over half of the ruins of immortality. At this time, if Ao Chijue wanted to talk about cooperation, wouldn't it be like picking the fruits of an autumn wind? Jiang Tian was not stupid. How could he agree? Not to mention, whether they were really the descendants of the previous heavenly court was still a big question mark. Even if they were, so what? It was Jiang Tian and the great bandits who fought for the country. Did they have to give it back to him? As for falling out with the heavenly court's killer dynasty, Jiang Tian was not afraid at all. The heavenly court's killer dynasty did have some resources. They had divine transformation realm cultivators and were on par with the 7 great bandits. However, no matter how strong they were no match for the headmaster and the sword god. Otherwise, they would have already overthrown the empire of the ruins of immortality. After receiving the order, Fu Heishui whistled and broke through the void. After a few flashes, he crossed hundreds of miles and arrived at the outer defense line of the fallen immortal sea. He whistled in the sky and immediately attracted the attention of the black-clothed servant. He, who was a little annoyed, suddenly shouted, "The master of the heavenly court's killer dynasty, Ao Chijue, is here. Come out and welcome him." He Shuifu was hanging upside down in the void with his arms hugging his shoulders. The muscles on his body were bunched up as he sneered and said, "My master has said that all of you have gone against Fairy by Mushue, barging into the pass and crushing the fortress. You did not follow the rules of the new heavenly court and will be severely punished. You kneel down and surrender, and I will spare your life." "How dare you?" The black-clothed servant's expression changed. Chapter 1634. Please don't be impatient. It's just a misunderstanding. In the face of a great enemy, we should join hands and fight side by side. We should be of one mind to fight the enemy together. Ji Tao and Ji Yusha, the brother and sister of the world of assassins, were shocked and tried to persuade them. The Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty used that name because they were the descendants of the ancient Heavenly Court's royal family. Because of that identity, Ao Chijue, the master of the dynasty, could summon a lot of people when he called for help. That was something the world of humans, hell, and the great bandits couldn't compare to. In the past, even the great bandits had to be polite. After all, they were just the roots of the divine generals. To put it bluntly, their ancestors were just subordinates for others to order around. Besides, the Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty was indeed powerful. They had a few experienced soul formation cultivators who were strong enough to fight against the 7 great bandits. Besides, Ao Chijue was also talented and had reached the top of the soul formation level. He cultivated the Heavenly Emperor's Jade Scroll and the imperial art of hegemony and was extremely powerful. Then, Ao Chijue of the Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty had come to ask for cooperation. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And yet, Kong Teichu wanted to punish him. Those who offend the Heavenly Court should be killed. At this time, a soul formation overlord stepped out of the flying boat and said coldly, "What's the matter?" The Heavenly Court was built by the royal family of the previous dynasty. This name is very important. How can you use it so casually? Go and ask Jiang Taichu if he has the tiniest bit of royal bloodline or emperor bloodline in him. He's just a buffoon. How dare he call himself a lone cultivator and deceive the world? Did he get the permission of the royal family of the previous dynasty? Yi Huan, the killing god. Ji Tao was stunned. He didn't expect him to come out. That soul formation overlord was tall and straight. He had sharp eyebrows, bright eyes, and a handsome face. Even though there were a few strands of white hair on his temples, it didn't make him look old. Instead, it added a bit of mature charm. He was also dressed like a servant, but his face was brimming with a noble air. His every movement was elegant and carried a sense of superiority. He was like an emperor who had descended to look down on his subjects. This man was none other than the god of slaughter, Yi Huan. He was a member of the royal family of the ancient celestial court. His ancestor had once been an emperor, but he had fallen in a great battle with the headmaster and the old ruins emperor during the age of Dao damage. He had shed blood and sacrificed himself to protect the natives of the deity ground. His current identity in the Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty was merely Ao Chijue's subordinate servant, one of the 4 great killing generals. "That's me," Yi Huan said with arrogance in his eyes. His long saber swept toward He Shuifu. This slash caused the Tao of the blade to rumble and tremble. The laws of the blade interweaved, causing the ghastly light of the blade to transform into a long river that split the heavens and the earth apart. It was as if an emperor was enraged and was holding his blade to punish his subjects, asking the boundless world who would rise and fall as he annihilated all the unruly people in the world. The killing god Yi Huan did not take Blackwater Fu seriously at all. This was because he had once fought with Fu Heishui several decades ago and had completely suppressed him. In the fallen Immortal Sea region, many bandits were frightened by this scene. The Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty is so powerful. A servant was already at the nascent soul level and could totally be the city lord of the ruins of immortality. And this killing general was actually a divine transformation realm cultivator who was on par with their great bandit leader. Just as the river-like Tao of the blade aura was about to reach him, Fu Heishui's expression did not change. He just raised his hand and flicked his finger. With a bang, the earth shook and the air twisted. The Tao of the blade aura and even the Tao fragments were all broken and collapsed. As for the killing god Yi Huan, it was as if he had been hit in the chest by a giant hammer. His face suddenly turned pale and he stumbled back 7 or 8 steps. The array patterns on the ground of the flying boat shone brightly and almost collapsed before he stopped. However, his bones cracked and he spat out blood. Apparently, he had been severely injured. How is this possible? In an instant, many cultivators of the Heavenly Court's assassin dynasty were dumbfounded and could not believe it. Because Fu Heishui was no match for Yi Huan before. But now, it was obvious that Fu Heishui was stronger. What's going on? Yi Huan covered his chest and quickly adjusted his breathing to repair his body and divine treasures. However, as he looked into Blackwater Fu's eyes, his pupils suddenly shrank and his heart trembled. It was said that the reform of Kong Teichu and the bandits had adapted many cultivation arts to the world of the ruins of deity and even the stars in the sky. Yi Huan had heard about it, but he didn't believe it at all. Because since the age of Tao damage, countless descendants of the ancient deity land and countless cultivators had been changing old cultivation arts to adapt to the changes in the world, but they had not succeeded. And yet, Jiang Tian had succeeded after only a few days in this world. But then he felt that Fu Heishui's cultivation art was very different from before. Every move he made seemed to be in harmony with the world, as if he had become one with the world. He couldn't help but be shocked and couldn't believe it. Is Kong Teichu really the reincarnation of a deity? Yi Huan felt uneasy and didn't dare to act recklessly. Fu Heishui, do you really want to be enemies with the Heavenly Court? If the Master of the 7 Deadly is alerted, even if you are Kong Teichu, you will be killed, not to mention that you are just a soul formation cultivator. The old servant in black was just a nascent soul cultivator, but he dared to threaten Fu Heishui, who was a soul formation cultivator. Obviously, he was fearless and thought that he had a powerful trump card. How dare you? The name of the new Heavenly Court's celestial monarch is not something a slave like you can call him by his name. Fu Heishui flew into a rage. He opened his bloody mouth and let out an explosive roar. The sound wave laws distorted the sky and bombarded the black-clothed servant like an invisible heavy cannon. How dare you kill me? I am the slave of the Master of the 7 Deadly. Although the servant in black used many kinds of defensive spells and activated 5 or 6 defensive true weapons, he still couldn't block the power of Fu Heishui's roar. Under the vibration of the sound wave law, his clothes were torn and scattered like flowers. His skin cracked and his bones and flesh separated. In the end, blood mist spread and even his flesh, bones, and organs turned into pieces and floated in the air. The power of a single roar is so terrifying. This scene completely stunned Yi Huan and the other Heavenly Court assassins. His original arrogance and despotism instantly disappeared and was replaced by deep fear and awkwardness. After killing him, Fu Heishui smiled faintly and said, "Just now, this evil servant commanded the battleship to crash into my fortress, which is a restricted area. Now the evil leader has been killed. I won't argue with you anymore. Please go back." Although Fu Heishui was cruel and bloodthirsty, he was not a brainless person. After all, he was an old monster with a lifespan of 1,000 years. He knew how to act appropriately. In fact, he knew that the real masters of this flying ship were Yi Huan and the other 2 soul formation cultivators. However, he could only use this servant in black as a scapegoat. The new Heavenly Court had to maintain its dominance and couldn't lose its dignity. Otherwise, no one would submit to it and it would take advantage of it. However, when facing a powerful enemy, it couldn't aggravate the conflict too much. 800 miles away from the fallen Immortal Sea. In the clouds, a cloud tower floated in the air. Around it, dozens of large ships floated in the air. Thousands of Foundation establishment, golden core, and nascent soul cultivators wore armor and were filled with killing intent. They surrounded and protected the cloud tower in the middle. That cloud tower was like an immortal palace floating in the air. It was extremely exquisite. Every brick and tile was magnificent, flowing with light and overflowing with color, as if they were precious gold and divine jade. All kinds of runes and Dao patterns intertwined, exquisite and beautiful. However, it also contained the Dao of heaven and earth, exuding the majesty of an emperor. Its value was more than 10 times or even 100 times that of the cloud tower where Yi Huan and the others were. Although it was high up in the sky, it didn't feel cold. The heater boomed. There was no burning charcoal, but a fiery red bead, known as the fire bead, hung there. The fire bead was carved from 10,000-year-old warm jade. It was full of yang energy. When a cultivator came into contact with it, it could dispel moisture and cold, strengthen bones and tendons, condense the soul, and strengthen one's consciousness. This item was extremely rare and precious. Even the ruins Emperor's palace probably didn't have much of it. At that moment, a man was sitting in the pavilion. He was extremely handsome, like a celestial being. He wore a dragon robe and a purple gold crown, faintly exuding a domineering aura. His cultivation had also reached the first level of soul formation. His horns were prominent and his eyes were golden. It was obvious that he had the bloodline of the demon race. However, his aura was righteous and bright, completely different from ordinary demon aura. This man was the descendant of Ao Emperor Ao Chijua. Behind him, there were several soul formation stage warriors standing respectfully. Every one of them had extraordinary strength and was on par with Yi Huan. What is a celestial emperor? Ao Chijua sipped his tea gently. His actions were elegant and calm. Ruling the world, holding great power, having the power of life and death, gathering the power of all living beings. With a word, he could move mountains and fill seas, turning land into rivers. It's not surprising that the ancient celestial emperors could have such power with the heaven-offering talisman. However, the later emperors could still rule the world without the heaven-offering talisman. It's because of the rules of etiquette. Etiquette is deeply rooted in people's hearts. Everyone is afraid of the imperial power and the stars surround the moon. Thousands of glories are gathered on one person, which naturally nurtures the aura of the emperor. Etiquette is the ultimate Tao. Because the heaven-offering talisman was lost, humans were rude and inevitably killed each other. So, the saints created etiquette to replace the will of heaven and govern people's hearts. Etiquette is the will of heaven. So, even though the heaven-offering talisman was lost, the emperor's edict still has the aura of the emperor. Kong Teichu wants to become an emperor, but he doesn't conform to the rules of etiquette. Haha, Kong Teichu doesn't have the blood of the royal family of the ancient heavenly courts. Secondly, he doesn't have the inheritance of the ancient heavenly courts. Thirdly, he doesn't know the rules of the heavenly courts and acts recklessly. How can he be an emperor? One of the remaining elders looked at them with arrogance and disdain. He snorted coldly and said, "Everyone knows that the heavenly court's assassins have the blood of the royal family of the ancient heavenly courts. We're orthodox and noble, respected by everyone. Kong Teichu is just a commoner. He doesn't have the blood of the emperor or the ability to govern a country. As long as we don't say anything, the locals of the deity ground won't acknowledge him." Chapter 1635. By right, Kong Teichu has already crossed the line by establishing the new heavenly court. He's just a commoner. How can he be called an emperor? He deserves to be killed. Even I want to kill him with one slap. But His Majesty Chijue is kind and merciful, so he didn't argue with him. Another soul formation cultivator said like an old man. He's just a cultivator from the savage land, an abandoned person from the wasteland. He doesn't know the rules of the ancestors, so he's not guilty. Ao Chijue waved his hand as if he was generous and didn't want to argue with an insignificant person. He smiled and said, "But he's a talented general." Another elder was also complacent. He said, "Jiang Taichu must be flattered that the killing god Yi Huan extended an olive branch on behalf of His Majesty to make Jiang Taichu a marquis and a prime minister. He kowtowed 3 times and 9 times to thank His Majesty." Just as everyone was happily chatting, a voice suddenly rang out. Suddenly, hundreds of miles away, at the defense line, there was a sudden burst of blade light. Then, there was a roar that shook the earth and cracked the clouds in the sky. What's going on? Did Yi Huan fight with someone? Everyone looked over and someone asked in confusion. Ao Qijue frowned and showed a hint of displeasure on his face. Is Kong Teichu so unruly? It's a great honor for him to be summoned by me. Does he dare to defy my order? Second god of slaughter, go and have a look. Ao Qijue's face was calm. He waved his hand and gave the order. Vaguely, he had the temperament of a royal family. The divine transformation realm experts standing behind him were sweating profusely. Second god of slaughter quickly bowed and said, Yi Huan has sent a message. His servant was killed and Fu Heishui didn't want to negotiate. It should be Kong Teichu's idea? I'll go and have a look now. The second god of slaughter turned into a beam of golden light and rushed to the sky, flying toward the fallen immortal sea region. Seeing Ao Qijue's displeasure, the divine transformation realm elders around him quickly persuaded, Your Majesty Qijue, don't worry. How could Kong Teichu's subordinates, such as Heishui Fu, be a match for two semi-god realm warriors? I think he can only kneel and beg for mercy. Besides, the great bandits were originally the former subordinates of the ancient heavenly court, the descendants of the divine generals of heaven and earth. How would they dare to attack His Majesty's men? There must be some misunderstanding here. Your Majesty has worked hard to govern the country, and your political and military achievements have attracted the support of the masses. Kong Teichu can't wait to worship you, so why would he refuse to cooperate with you? Ao Qijue's expression eased up slightly when he heard this, and he continued chatting with the assassins and officials. Scram. My Celestial the Arch has already said that he won't cooperate. Why is there so much nonsense? But just a minute or two later, another roar was heard. Then, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. Then, the flying boat that Yi Huan was in exploded, and flames soared into the sky. This Kong Teichu is so arrogant. Ao Qijue stood up abruptly. His gaze was slightly stern, and the flames of fury in his heart soared to the heavens. A wave of intense killing intent surged. But then, a few nascent soul cultivators rushed in, crying for their parents. Ao Qijue saw Yi Huan and Heishui Fu, and his heart sank. He had a bad feeling. As expected, those blood-stained cultivators said in a trembling voice, Your Majesty, Yi Huan and Divine Lord Qingming have both been killed. This Jiang Taichu is so overbearing. He even dares to kill this emperor's officials. Does he not even dare to give this emperor face? Ao Qijue was furious and was about to give the order to attack the fallen deity Xi. A nascent soul cultivator said in a daze, Your Majesty, it wasn't Kong Teichu who did it. It was Fu Heishui, one of the 7 great bandits, who killed Yi Huan and Divine Lord Qingming on his own. What? Ao Qijue's heart skipped a beat and he felt a chill run down his spine. He swallowed the vicious words that were about to come out of his mouth. If Fu Heishui, one of Kong Teichu's subordinates, had reached such a level, how powerful was Kong Teichu? The 7 great bandits alone were enough to deal with him, even without Kong Teichu. I came here with the intention of joining forces to defeat the ruins capital. But I didn't expect Kong Teichu to be so arrogant. Looks like he's not a talent and can't be used. Ao Qijue waved his hand and asked the buildings, flying boats and weapons to leave this place. Master, Kong Teichu killed our divine general. How can we not take revenge? I'm willing to lead an army to level the islands in the fallen deity Xi and kill Kong Teichu. A soul formation grand cultivator yelled. Ao Qijue seemed to be disinterested. He waved his hand and said magnanimously, The saints of the ancient heavenly courts ruled the world with benevolence and justice, repaying evil with kindness. Even though he was disrespectful to me, he was fighting for the remaining races in the deity ground anyway. I'm the son of God. I should have the tolerance to swallow the sun and the moon and tolerate the world. I can tolerate people's mistakes. How can I argue with him? Your Majesty, you're always thinking about the world. We admire your generosity. Your Majesty, you're wise. Sooner or later, Jiang Taichu will understand your majesty's painstaking efforts and be moved by your majesty's kindness. Your majesty, you'll definitely build a foundation that will last forever. In the tide of flattery, many flying boats and cloud towers disappeared in the sky. They did not even dare to collect the clothes of Yi Huan and Li Mu. They were as panicked as stray dogs. Jiang Tian retracted his immortal will. There was a hint of mockery in his eyes, and he said with a half-smile, repaying evil with kindness and tolerating people's mistakes? If you can't beat them, just run. If you can defeat him, I'm afraid you'll be repaying kindness with kindness, repaying grievances with grievances. Kindness will be rewarded and evil will be punished. The laws are strict. With his powerful immortal will, he could see that Ao Qijue was indeed a descendant of Ao Huang. He wasn't sure if he was a direct disciple, but at least his bloodline was much purer than Ao Feng's. The other assassins of the heavenly courts also had good bloodlines. But the problem was that their techniques were not good enough and they acted wretchedly. They were not as straightforward as the great bandits. Sigh, I wonder how Ao Huang would feel if he were to come back to life and see his descendant being so despicable. Jiang Tian shook his head and sighed. He quickly threw these thoughts to the back of his mind and continued to cultivate. Soon, the assassins of the heavenly courts wanted to ally with the new heavenly courts but were stopped by Kong Teichu. The news of him killing 2 divine transformation realm cultivators also spread. Like a hurricane, it caused a huge uproar. In the ruined city, the wind and rain were bleak and gloomy. The mournful cries shook the sky. The bodies of the teacher and the sword god were not preserved. They were both made into cenotaphs and held state funerals. The imperial family of the ruins of immortality, the nobles, the leaders of the aristocratic families and sects, tens of thousands of people attended. The eyes of the hundreds of millions of people in the ruined capital were red from crying, their hearts and lungs torn apart. It was said that tens of thousands of people committed suicide in a day. It was like the end of the world. Because many people's feelings for the teacher and the sword god were extraordinary. It was like their faith. This Kong Teichu is really arrogant to the extreme. After hearing the news from the outside world, Fairy Jade Lotus couldn't help but sneer. She was now under orders to control the entire ruins city's grand formation. Jiang Tian attacking the city was very important to her. At the same time, she was also the person who understood the ruins city's grand formation the best. Therefore, she was very confident. To break the ruins city's grand formation, the more experts there are, the higher the chance of success. If he allies with the Heavenly Court's assassins, it will at least increase the chance of success by 10%. I heard that the Jade Lady sect, which is on good terms with Kong Teichu and the 7 Great Bandits, has drawn a clear line with Kong Teichu. Obviously, they don't think highly of Kong Teichu's reckless actions. Attacking the ruined city is suicidal. Really? Of course it's true. Fairy Rui Long has already severed ties with Bai Muxue and asked a noble to pass on a message to Prince Xiahe at the ruins Emperor's Palace. Don't you understand? This is an official announcement. Kong Teichu really doesn't know his limits. The ruined city is an ancient city with ancient divine restrictions and divine formations guarding it. That's the foundation of the ruins of Immortality Empire. Does he think he's a pushover? He's obviously courting his own destruction by charging in like this. Many people shook their heads and mocked Jiang Tian when they heard this, as if he was a joke. This kid was extremely talented and his cultivation was heaven-defying. However, he was too self-opinionated and didn't know when to stop. For a time, all kinds of rumors and analysis about Jiang Tian were rampant. Then, another earth-shattering piece of news came from where Jiang Tian was cultivating in seclusion. Kong Teichu will destroy the ruined city by himself. He won't ask anyone else for help. After the news came out, everyone was even more shocked. They thought they were hallucinating. One person, challenging a cultivation dynasty. This time, not only the cultivators of the ruins of immortality, but also many descendants of the deity ground were dumbfounded. They shook their heads and sighed, thinking that Jiang Tian was too reckless. Not only had such a thing never happened in the ruins of Immortality Empire, but also in the era of the ancient heavenly courts. Not even the ancient sages could do it. At this moment, even the cultivators in the most remote corners of the ruins of immortality rode on their flying swords and rushed to the ruined city. They didn't want to miss the most brilliant and magnificent battle in history that would change history. Many divine lords were alarmed. Some living fossils in the grotto heavens even woke up from their coffins and rushed to the ruined city. They didn't want to witness it, but to participate in the battle. For the top cultivators, they wanted to kill Jiang Tian even if they had to fight to the last person. I regret it so much. We only know that Kang Teichu is powerful, but we didn't expect him to be so reckless and self-opinionated. If Kang Teichu dies this time, we'll still be punished by the ruins of Immortality Empire. At this moment, Divine Lords Xian Nu and Sun Shao of the Water Moon Grotto Heaven shook their heads in regret. But it was too late. On the Xintian mountain range, they had already made it clear that they were on Jiang Tian's side. The news that Jiang Tian had taken their Grotto Heaven's treasure, the Wind Rain flag, and his strength had increased rapidly was also leaked. At this time, they wouldn't be forgiven even if they went to the ruins Emperor's palace to apologize. Chapter 1636. In 7 days, the entire ruins of deity was in turmoil. Yet, the fallen deity Sea realm was extremely peaceful. After holding the funerals of the fallen bandits and meeting with Fairy Ruelong, Jiang Tian went into seclusion in the courtyard and did not move from there. Senior, Bai Muxue walked over with a terrified expression. She had mixed feelings. Firstly, she was worried about whether Jiang Tian could succeed in destroying the ruins capital and the ruins Emperor's palace. Secondly, there was some bad news about Fairy Ruelong. With Jiang Tian's vengeful personality, he would definitely not let her go after destroying the ruins Emperor's palace. Don't worry. I won't kill her. Jiang Tian opened his eyes and said calmly, although she joined the ruins Emperor's palace, she didn't hurt anyone. She just doesn't have confidence in me. She might be guilty, but she doesn't deserve to die. Besides, she once raised you and helped the great Ko clan. Jiang Tian's chaotic energy spread. The baby in the spirit embryo hugged the air and a cauldron made of chaotic fire was burning in the middle. The remaining chi, dharma power and immortal will of the sword god, the teacher and the soul formation cultivators in the cauldron had almost been completely refined. And Jiang Tian's power had reached the 3rd level of the nascent soul realm. The spirit embryo was even thicker and more solid, as if it were made of treasure gold and was indestructible. The chaotic 9 orifices divine infant was crystal clear and looked even more mystical. The chaotic energy lingered around it. If one looked closely, the tiniest particles were flickering like stars. The chaotic airflow was like numerous nebulas and numerous dazzling rivers of stars, and it contained the aura of the creation of the heavens and the earth and the beginning of all things. What will happen after Master takes over the ruins of deity? Bai Muxue asked. Don't worry. The great bandits and the ancestors of the ancient heavenly courts 10,000 years ago have a blood feud. I'll ask for it from the ruins of deity personally. I'll kill all the royals, all the officials of the ruins of deity and all the cultivators and descendants who participated in the invasion of the Dao damage era. I'll pay them back 10 times more with blood and a tooth for a tooth. Jiang Tian said. Bai Muxue's heart trembled violently. According to the history books, during the age of Dao damage, the number of native cultivators who died in the Wood Spirit Star's hands was 100 million. If they were to pay back 10 times, wouldn't they have to kill 1 billion people in the empire of the immortal ruins? They were almost exterminated. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. With each passing day, Jiang Tian's aura became more and more profound. In the end, his mind seemed to have merged with the vast deity ground and the countless predecessors who had died in the battle 10,000 years ago. Standing behind him, Bai Muxue felt that he was like a towering mountain, unshakable and unreachable. With this feeling, Long Shengnan understood. This battle was just like Jiang Tian's absolute heaven sword. There was only life and no death, only forward and no retreat. Finally, the 7th day. Above the boundless waves, the second south gate star, which was several times brighter than the sun, rose. When the rays of sunlight pierced through the darkness and fog, Jiang Tian's third-level nascent soul cultivation base was already incomparably stable. He slowly stood up. It was time for him to travel to the ruined capital and turn this world upside down. The fallen deity sea was in the easternmost part of the ruins of immortality. Sea monsters were everywhere, storms were violent, and there were even space cracks. It wasn't a place where human cultivators gathered. To the west of the fallen deity sea, about 10,000 miles away from the continent of the ruins of immortality, there was a floating mountain that stretched for 100 miles. This floating mountain was formed by the cultivators of the ruins of immortality who used their great Dharma power to install a floating array. It was where the army of the Empire of the Ruins of Immortality was stationed. At this time, many beams of light shot over from afar. But when they were 100 miles away from the floating mountain, they stopped. "Sister, why did we stop here?" A young woman on a flying sword asked softly. She had a graceful figure and a pretty face. She was wearing a plain long dress and her fluffy hair gave people a natural and playful feeling. But her eyes were red and swollen, and her eyes were sad. She was wearing a mourning dress and had apparently just cried and was in mourning. She also had a nascent soul cultivation base. In this world, she could completely control a medium-sized sect. Beside her was a female cultivator on a flying sword. Her features were similar to her, and she was also wearing a mourning dress. Her beautiful brows were slightly furrowed, and with hatred she said softly, "Now, all the cultivators above the nascent soul stage in the ruins of immortality have mobilized to fight to the death with Kong Teichu. From the fallen deity sea to the ruins capital, several strong lines of defense have been set up. This is the first line. I think he will be killed here." Hearing this, the younger sister was so excited that her delicate body trembled. Her full chest heaved up and down violently. She gritted her teeth and said with hatred, "Yes, I can't wait to see him killed. This evil thief, this bandit, deserves to die 10,000 times. He should be skinned alive, and his soul should be extracted and burned in the heavenly fire for 10,000 years." During this time, many cultivators had come to watch the battle. There were at least a few thousand people. Some had even been here for 2 or 3 days. Seeing the arrival of the two beautiful women, the eyes of a few cultivators on a treasure ship immediately lit up, and their voices also became louder. The leader of the group, a young man in a brocade robe, clasped his fists and said, "Fellow cultivator, may I know your name? Looking at your sword and Daoist robe, you seem to be a fellow cultivator from the Tianmong Grotto heaven?" The other cultivators revealed looks of anticipation. The younger sister's expression was cold and arrogant, and she didn't answer. The older sister seemed to be easier to get along with, and she immediately smiled and said, "I'm Zhao Rou, and this is my younger sister, Zhao Na." Boom! The whole place was in an uproar. Although no one dared to talk loudly, they were all communicating with their divine senses and couldn't calm down. These two women were the daughters of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven's sect master and the younger sisters of Zongzi Zhao Shanhe. Their beauty shook the world, and they were known as the two fairies of the Sichuan province. Those foolish men and women in the mortal world had even made statues of them and built many two fairies temples. It was said that prayers were incomparably efficacious and would definitely bring good fortune. So it's our great hero, the daughter of the Tianmong Grotto Heaven's sect master. I'm Zongzi Zhou Kaiwan of the Bright Moonsword sect. I've long heard of the two of you fairies. Why don't we have a chat on the treasure ship? The young man in a brocade robe immediately looked at them with a hint of undetectable passion in his eyes as he invited them warmly. All right, then we'll have to trouble you. Zhao Rou also knew that flying swords in the air for a long time would consume a lot of primordial qi and dermic powers. She immediately held her sister's hand and stepped on the swords to fly to the ship. After taking their seats, the young man in a brocade robe, Zhou Kaiwan, smiled and said, "As far as I know, the head of the sea-suppressing family, Zhao Tulong, has already led 4 soul formation seniors to the floating mountain. Fellow cultivator Zhao Rou is right. If we go to the rear line of defense, we might not be able to see the scene of Kang Teichu being slaughtered, because he will die here. The sea-suppressing family is one of the 8 guardian families. They originally belonged to the royal family. Back then, one of their daughters married into the ruins emperor's bloodline and became his imperial concubine. Kang Teichu challenged the authority of the dynasty. The sea-suppressing family will definitely not sit idly by. Zhao Rou said softly with a serious expression. Although the guardian families were not as powerful as the 6 grotto heavens, they were still a force to be reckoned with. Especially since Zhao Talong was proficient in all kinds of water-type cultivation arts, arrays and so on. He could summon wind and rain and control thunder and lightning. In this place, he could make full use of his home ground advantage. It's far from enough. Zhao Na shook her head slightly after hearing that. Kang Teichu was an unparalleled demon. On the Xiantian mountain range, he had already killed the top grand gods such as the Master of the Academy and the Sword God. He had also killed all the sect masters and elders of the 6 grotto heavens. After all, the sea-suppressing family was not as powerful as those overlords or forces. How could they be a match for Kang Teichu? It's not just the sea-suppressing family, the Zhao family. Even the medicine god sect, the Fei King Hall and the Haotian sword sect in the eastern region have gathered here. There are at least a dozen soul formation cultivators. This time, all of them are soldiers. They are risking their lives. A cultivator said with a complicated expression. He was a bit confused. Even if the ruins of deity were about to collapse, there was no need to risk their lives with Kang Teichu. But he didn't know. 1,000 years ago, the news that the expedition army of the ruins of deity had arrived on Earth had already spread among the ruling class of the dynasty. Soul formation cultivators and nascent soul cultivators in certain planes were all mobilized. The despair of the South Gate 2 stars that the worlds would be destroyed made them fearless of death. To preserve a glimmer of hope for the expeditionary army's roots, and to make them kill Jiang Tian at all costs. In that case, there is some hope. When the Zhao sisters heard that, they felt relieved and a trace of joy appeared on their faces. Chapter 1637. The Zhao siblings were filled with emotions. The dynasty was still great and immortal. Even though Kang Teichu was so powerful and ferocious, like a demon and a god, he had killed 2 divine emperors, suppressed 6 grotto heavens, and killed 2 giants, the headmaster and the sword god. How terrifying was that? But the cultivators of the ruins of immortality were still fearless and fought to defend the dynasty. The mobilization ability of the dynasty and the unity of the cultivators were shocking and touching, making one's blood boil. If the ruins of immortality dynasty mobilizes all of its forces, Demon Jiang will definitely die. Zhao Na's tone was firm and there was no longer any doubt. Kang Teichu is too unwise. Zhou Kaiwen shook his head and a trace of disdain appeared on his face. He said mockingly, his best choice is to forget history and past grudges and work together with the ruins of Immortality Dynasty to solve the problem of the 3rd planet of the South Gate. Otherwise, without the skin, what's the hair? In the end, everyone will die. If he occupies this world, he will be a short-lived emperor. What's the point? Even if he is blinded by his desire for power and insists on being called the Emperor Dao Ancestor, there's no need to be so anxious. He can guard a 3rd-grade world, improve his cultivation, expand his territory, train his subordinates, and slowly fight against the dynasty. But he insists on risking his life to fight against the ruins of immortality. Now that the Ruins Emperor's Palace has given the order, the entire Ruins of Immortality is mobilized. No matter how strong he is, can he be stronger than the power of the world? Not to mention, the majestic imperial city, the impregnable pass of ancient times, has an extremely deep foundation and countless restrictive formations that are incomparably dangerous. How could it be something that Jiang Taichu can imagine? The reason was simple. The Ruins of Immortality was the base of the Ruins of Immortality Dynasty and its most important home ground. The Xiantian mountain range was barren and not the home ground of the headmaster and the sword god. If they were to switch places and guard the academy or the ruins of immortality, they would be able to mobilize several times more laws than before. Kang Taichu might not be able to withstand a single blow. Jiang Taichu wanted to be the emperor, so he lost his mind and lost his rationality. He knows that this world will be destroyed soon, so he's in such a hurry to stake everything. Stupid. A cultivator shook his head and gave a guess. Understandable. After all, he is just an insignificant cultivator from the outskirts of barbarian land. I heard that even on Middle Saturn he was born in a humble family. His parents were just lowly merchants, lowly people who only know how to seek personal gain. Zhao Rou said disdainfully, the people at the bottom of society are bullied and have a twisted mentality. They love to be the emperor. Even if they die after being the emperor for a day, they will be satisfied. In fact, other than the floating mountain, there were many other lines of defense. Every line of defense was guarded by a semi-god realm warrior. They occupied the key passes and had huge cities and sects as their base. They set up a vast array and were as impregnable as steel. During these 7 days, Jiang Tian was bitterly cultivating in seclusion. As for the entire ruins of immortality, bugle horns were blown and banners fluttered in the wind. The ruins of immortality were filled with essence energy that shot into the heavens. They were completely boiling as they entered the highest state of battle. Cultivators above a certain level of strength all responded to the call. They were as vast as the ocean, wanting to fight to the death with Jiang Tian. All kinds of news spread quickly. Earth-shattering figures appeared one after another and walked around the world. They worked together to fight against Kang Taichu, which made people inexplicably shocked and frightened. There were even some living fossils who had an endless lifespan and were on par with the headmaster and the god of swords. They had experienced the great war of the age of Dao damage and then retired to the mountains and forests. They had condensed their blood and stopped their lifespan. They jumped out of their coffins and joined the war. Their appearance was earth-shattering and set off waves of monstrous waves. These living fossils and old monsters had been in seclusion for too long. Only a few details had been passed down. Their foundation was so deep that people couldn't figure it out. They were extremely mysterious and caused all kinds of speculations. Sister, what do you think Kang Taichu has a chance of winning? Zhao Na asked softly after hearing the discussion around her. Her father and brother had both died at the hands of Jiang Tian in the battle in the Xiantian mountain range. It was a blood feud. Zhao Rou longed to see Jiang Tian die. Now that the final battle was about to begin, she couldn't calm down. From his performance in the battle in the Xiantian mountain range, we can see that although Kang Taichu is only at the nascent soul level, he has already condensed laws and can control space to form a domain. In terms of his powerful laws and domain, he's no different from a soul formation cultivator. His body is especially strong. When he faced the divine Emperor Lai Hua and the Grotto Heavens, he didn't even use dermic powers or laws. He's probably a transcendent grade nascent soul. Ordinary nascent soul cultivators can't compare to him. Even sacred weapons can't hurt him. In terms of combat strength, even peak soul formation cultivators are no match for him. The defeat of the headmaster of academy and the sword god is proof. Zhao Rou frowned and looked worried. Doesn't that mean that Kang Taichu is going to win this battle? Zhao Na said anxiously. Not necessarily. Zhao Rou shook her head and said, the power of the Ruins Emperor's family is far beyond our imagination. In addition, there are many defense lines and living fossils that don't appear in the world have come out. Billions of cultivators and mortals are working together to kill Kang Taichu. Kang Taichu is definitely going to lose this battle. She said earth-shattering names one after another, making everyone's heart race, and they nodded. One more thing. Kang Taichu has only been through the fierce battle in the Xiantian mountain range for a few days. He has consumed a lot of energy and hasn't recovered in a short time. How can he be as well prepared as the giants and tyrants? Zhou Kaiwen also added. At that moment, the sun was already high up in the sky. Jiang Tian still hadn't appeared and the scorching sun shone down. Is Kang Taichu coming or not? Why is there still no sign of him until now? Everyone was getting impatient from waiting. Zhou Kaiwen suddenly frowned and said thoughtfully, "Now that the entire ruins of immortality is mobilized, the momentum is huge. Could it be that Jiang Taichu is afraid and doesn't dare to appear, or has he fled thousands of miles away? That's very likely. Maybe he's just bluffing and setting up a trap. In fact, he's already secretly gone. Has he already run away?" Everyone was stunned. They looked at each other and nodded, mocking one another. Suddenly, a nascent soul heavenly lord rubbed his eyes, looked to the east and yelled, "What? He's here." In the endless light in the sky, a person walked over slowly like a black silhouette with his back facing the southern gate 2 stars. Kong Teichu had arrived. At that moment, the entire ruins of immortality was silent. Countless people raised their heads and looked at the tall and majestic back through the golden light screen. In the vast sky, there were no clouds for thousands of miles. The scorching sun was high up in the sky, glaring and blazing. More than 10 floating islands were shrouded in milky white clouds. Occasionally, there were flashes of light, but it was silent and solemn. Some kind of overlords were hidden, waiting to attack. At that moment, a person in a black outfit came from the east. He had black hair and black eyes and was tall and majestic. He didn't walk on a sword or a flying Dharma artifact. He was simple and didn't have any aura to speak of. However, his every movement gave people a feeling that he was in harmony with heaven and earth, a natural and harmonious charm. Kong Teichu is here. At that moment, all the Dharma artifacts were activated and aimed at Jiang Tian, transmitting the image to every corner of the ruins of immortality. At this moment, from the impregnable past to the dilapidated streets, all the mortals and cultivators stared fixedly at the back of the figure with extremely complicated expressions. Hatred, anger, fear, confusion, shock, and even admiration. All kinds of emotions were intertwined. But one thing was certain: at that moment, no one could ignore Kong Teichu's existence. Chapter 1638. Swish, swish, swish. The expressions of Zhao Na and the others changed drastically. The treasured ship and the other flying Dharma artifacts all scattered and retreated 1,000 miles away. They also activated their defensive formations. Everyone knew how earth-shattering the battle between Soul Formation Grand Cultivators would be once it started. It would be extremely destructive. A wisp of Dharma laws could easily kill a nascent soul cultivator. At the same time, the floating mountain that was shrouded in clouds suddenly let out a thunderous sound and shook. Colorful rays of light shot into the sky and revealed its true appearance. The Grand Pass is as tough as iron. Everyone yelled and was shocked to see that. On the numerous floating mountains were various palaces, fortresses, and formations that overlapped layer upon layer without end. All of them were lofty, and possessed grand auras. Some flickered with the glow of treasures, some shot out explosively with silver light, some were coiled with black mist, some were ghastly with sword chi, and they were heavy and miraculous to the extreme. They emitted monstrous might that shook the heavens and the earth, causing one's heart to palpitate and feel oppressed. Basically, they were all at the level of Dao artifacts. Amidst the earth-shattering cheers of the drums that shook the heavens, many chariots, flying ships and battleships were arranged in a military formation and pushed forward together, covering the sky and the sun. They surrounded Jiang Tian in a triangular formation. All of these combat magic treasures were extremely enormous, and they were like moving castles. They were easily 300 m long or 3 kilometers long, and they possessed powerful imposing auras and emanated ancient brilliance. Moreover, the talisman markings inscribed on them flickered with bright light and flowed without stopping. They emanated the energy of the Grand Tao, and they were entirely capable of resisting a casual strike from a soul transformation expert. There were nascent soul Dharma laws and Grand Tao laws around those large Dharma artifacts. The energy of the soul formation cultivators was released without any scruples, surging like tides, earth-shattering. Zhao Rou and her sister felt their hearts palpitating. Ha! Above the Dharma artifacts and in the fortresses, thousands of cultivators were wearing cold metal armors. They were wearing helmets and masks that even covered their faces, which was extremely terrifying. At this moment, they suddenly shouted in unison. Their voices were like waves, rolling up and pushing toward Jiang Tianheng. The space was distorted from the tremors, and the blue waves of the ocean surged with monstrous waves. Numerous tornadoes were formed, connecting the heavens and the bottom of the ocean. They were extremely terrifying as they surged towards Jiang Tian. However, how could these changes in the sky hurt Jiang Tian? Jiang Tian stood there in the air, surrounded by the aura of primal chaos. Those tornadoes either dispersed or avoided him. Jiang Tian's clothes didn't even flutter. His expression was calm as he looked at them mockingly. Do you really want to stop me? Kang Teichu, the Zhao clan of the sea-suppressing clan, has suppressed all corners of the world and fought to protect the ruins of immortality. Today I will kill you. A cultivator riding a mighty flood dragon soared into the sky from the huge warship and faced Jiang Tian directly. It was Zhao Tulong. This person's figure was abnormally tall and stalwart, like a towering mountain peak. He had a leopard's head and round eyes, and his beard was like a brush. He was unstoppable, and his state was mighty and intimidating. He was clad in armor and held a heaven-art halberd in his hand. There was a lot of rust on his face, and his exposed skin was covered in dense scales as if it was covered in iron armor. Clearly, he was from the sea demon race and at least had a partial bloodline. He was already at the mid-stage of the soul formation realm, and his strength was probably on par with the Inferno Divine Emperor. He was solemn and his chi was vigorous. All kinds of water-type laws intertwined around him, and his aura was domineering. Cultivator Taichu, we cultivators should help those in danger and help those in distress. It is our responsibility to save the people in the world. Why do you have to stir up a storm of blood? For the imperial power? For revenge? I really don't understand. After all, if the third star of the South Gate explodes, we will all die. With Cultivator Taichu's Dharma eyes, you can naturally see through such falsehoods. A cultivator wearing a green robe embroidered with all kinds of orchids, jade trees, precious herbs and spirit herbs walked out slowly. His hair and beard were white, but his face was ruddy. He looked like an immortal and kind. His tone was neither warm nor angry. He spoke tirelessly, trying to dispel Jiang Tian's killing intent and fighting spirit. He was the founding ancestral master of the medicine god sect, and also a soul formation grand cultivator. He used to travel around the world barefoot to treat the poor. He treated the sick and the injured as his parents, and even cut his own flesh to treat people. He was known for his benevolence and was regarded as the medicine god of the world. He had billions of believers and countless statues in temples. Cultivator Taichu, don't be stubborn. Let go of your killing intent and we can completely forget about the past and make peace with you. The third star of the South Gate is about to explode. The most important thing now is to bring peace to the world and solve this crisis. For the descendants of the wood spirit planet, and for the natives of the deity ground and the people of the lower worlds. The master of the Demon King Hall was a seductive female cultivator. Her figure was extremely sexy. Her chest was high, her waist was slender and her legs were extremely long. Her legs were like jade pillars, and her overall figure was exquisite. However, she was full of demon chi and her eyes were like silk. She was also attacking with her mind, trying to dispel Jiang Tian's fighting spirit. If fellow Daoist Taichu insists on going his own way, we'll fight him to the death even though we're not as strong as him. The sect master of the Haotian sword sect was Zhu Wuchen. He was tall and his clothes fluttered in the wind. He looked handsome and otherworldly, like an immortal, but his eyes were cold and sharp like a peerless heavenly sword. He was a peerless sword cultivator in the ruins of deity, second only to the sword god. He was known as the sword saint. His sword was selfless and only wanted to kill the enemy. It carried a sharp chi, as if the world was big and could be cut open by him. He wasn't lying. Thousands of cultivators were loyal to the empire of the ruins of deity. Their eyes were calm and there wasn't a trace of fear in them. They were ready to die and their fighting spirit was surging like a tide. They were ready to die in this battle for loyalty, to protect the supreme dignity of the dynasty and to preserve the roots of their civilization. Fight to the death? Are you qualified? Jiang Tian chuckled. His cold eyes made his smile seem cruel and cold-blooded. Jiang Tian only responded with a slash. Jiang Tian didn't use the sky-severing sword. A deity artifact would consume a lot of energy. Besides, Jiang Tian didn't need the sky-severing sword to deal with normal soul formation cultivators. It was only a spirit treasure flying sword, not even a Dao artifact. Jiang Tian's current strength had the ability to turn something rotten into something magical. Even if it was a piece of scrap metal, he could unleash terrifying power. He slashed with his sword and a bright sword aura shone. The second star of the south gate seemed to have dimmed for a moment. It cut open the sky and a terrifying crack appeared. Kill! Seeing that Jiang Tian's sword had erupted and was rushing towards him, Zhu Wuchen did not show the slightest sign of fear. He roared and rushed towards Jiang Tian like a moth to a flame. The sword in his hand danced, and sword will erupted like a torrent. Between heaven and earth, a peerless killing intent filled the sky. Zhou Kaiwen, the Zhao sisters, and the others from the Tianmong Grotto heaven all felt their souls tremble, as if they were about to be annihilated. He's indeed the sword saint, Zhu Wuchen, many cultivators exclaimed. That slash contained the will of Haotian, as if the god of Haotian had descended to control the world. It was so powerful that it could overturn rivers and seas, subdue demons, forgive gods and pick stars. That sword Qi dragon was 1,000 feet long. It danced in the sky and went towards Jiang Tian with infinite power. Kong Teichu will die. The Zhao sisters were full of anticipation. The two of them felt that although that slash was slightly weaker than the sword gods, it was definitely more powerful than the sect masters of the Grotto heavens. At least, it was on par with the sect master of the Tianmong Grotto heaven. The Haotian sword sect was indeed powerful and was a rising star. Although they didn't occupy a Grotto heaven world and were located in the mortal world, their strength was definitely not inferior to the 6 Grotto heavens. Even if he doesn't die, he will be severely injured and exhausted. Zhou Kaiwen looked very confident. Bang! The two sword chi collided. The Haotian sword chi and the Dharma laws collapsed in an instant. They couldn't resist at all. Then, Zhu Wuchen screamed and roared. His body, divine treasures were all crushed by Jiang Tian's sword chi. The crystalline and translucent broken bones that were dyed with blood shot out violently, and they were shattered into pieces. After that, they were completely devoured by Jiang Tian's Taodai laws. At that moment, all the cultivators who were watching the battle were shocked. They couldn't believe it, as if they had seen a demon. It was too powerful. Zhu Wuchen, a sword saint and a soul formation overlord, was as powerful as the sect master of the Grotto heaven, but he was still killed by a slash. Kong Teichu is already in his peak state. How can he recover so quickly in 7 days? Zhou Kaiwen's eyes were deep. After all, he was also a nascent soul cultivator, so he could see some clues. Is this evil guy invincible? The Zhao sisters were terrified and their eyes were sad. They hated Jiang Tian to the core and wanted to see him die immediately. But what was shocking was, the defenders of the floating mountain sect showed no signs of fear. They charged forward without any regard for their own safety. With a furious roar, they turned into a torrent of steel and charged at Jiang Tian. All sorts of offensive formations and Dao treasures were activated as they attacked Jiang Tian. For the people in the world, for the righteous path, for the ruins of deity and for the dignity of the dynasty, we cultivators have a responsibility to protect the land. We can't retreat. We must overcome all difficulties and not be afraid of sacrifice. Seeing his old friend Zhu Wuchen die, Zhao Tulong's eyes were red. He stood on the head of the giant dragon and rushed over. He pointed his halberd at Jiang Tian and shouted, "For the righteous path, for the people and for the future generations, We'll bleed to the last drop of our blood. The drug god's face became as cold as iron and his eyes were firm. As he roared, he slapped the space ring at his waist and took out a golden merit flag. It gathered the power of faith of thousands of believers. It grew bigger and heavier in the wind, like dark clouds covering the sky. It smashed down at Jiang Tian like a mountain. The disciples of the Haotian sword sect were the fastest. The sword Saint Zhu Wuchen had been killed by Jiang Tian in front of them. How could they tolerate that? 3,000 of them were riding on a few flying boats that were shaped like swords. After a furious roar, thousands of flying swords rose into the air, leaving white space turbulence behind. They were like supersonic fighter jets, flashing sharp cold lights, densely covering the sky and covering the earth, attacking Jiang Tian. Go to hell! Jiang Tian's eyes were cold. He was as emotionless as the great Tao. He treated the people as dogs and killed them with one slash. When the sword slashed out, it was as if it split the chaos and yin and yang. An irregular curve suddenly split open between the heavens and the earth. It actually broke open space and completely enveloped and slashed at many sword-shaped flying boats. One after another, the flying boats collapsed and disappeared. Explosions occurred one after another. Huge flowers of fire bloomed in the sky. Metal melted and poured down wantonly like a heavy downpour. There were at least nascent soul cultivators among the 3,000 swordsmen. Some were even half a step away from the soul formation level, but almost none of them escaped. They were torn to pieces by the violent energy and burned to ashes by the terrifying heat. The Haotian sword sect was destroyed. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.